The story kicks off in the western part of the Mahidoro continent, 4 years after Cardian took the throne of the Eshrishar Empire and started his campaign to take over the neighboring kingdoms. Right in the middle of this crazy battlefield chaos, there was a mercenary who strongly preferred to keep his past completely under wraps. The guy seemed to be hiding some seriously dark secrets. Suddenly, the narrative hits the rewind button to the exact moment young Elric gets blindsided by the news that he has to tie the knot like yesterday. Totally clueless, he asks his dad what on earth is going on, but his old man just casually mentions that his future bride will be Baron Wibbin's daughter. His dad keeps dropping info, mentioning the girl is only 16 years old, insanely pretty, and that her one and only hobby is gardening. Right after that, the heavy doors of the massive meeting hall slowly start to creak open in front of them. The patriarch is totally convinced they'll make an awesome couple, and just like that, our 14-year-old MC watches his entire destiny get flipped upside down. He basically ended up engaged to a noble girl whose face he hadn't even seen, leaving him completely shell-shocked by the whole setup. Elric simply couldn't wrap his head around the fact that he was about to get hitched so out of nowhere. Already dressed up in his fancy wedding gear, he's still trying to process reality while staring blankly at the giant angel statue in the church. In that moment, he asks himself why a big-deal aristocrat from such a famous family would ever say yes to this arrangement. After all, it made zero sense for someone from high society to marry the heir of a regular, everyday merchant family like his. His overthinking gets cut short when his bride-to-be walks into the room and greets him with some seriously flawless grace. Elric freezes up completely, his face turning bright red the second he actually sees her, and he can barely mumble the name Tyria. She formally introduces herself as Tyria Wibbin as she elegantly glides toward him in her gorgeous wedding dress. The girl's beauty is honestly overwhelming, rocking glowing blonde hair that looks like a field of wheat and green eyes that shine like early spring leaves. Her complexion is super fair and soft, making the perfect contrast with lips as red as cherries. If Elric had to describe her in one sentence, he'd definitely say she was a mysterious and unbelievably classy young lady. Out of nowhere, someone taps the kid's shoulder to remind him to introduce himself, snapping him right out of his trance. A bit awkwardly, he bows to her and hopes they can build a great life together from that day forward. Even with his teenage brain totally short-circuiting from how fast everything is moving, one clear thought cuts through the noise. He realizes that starting from this super formal moment at the altar, he's going to spend the rest of his days with this unique person. Looking back on it, Elric realizes that the intense rush of emotion he felt when looking at her was actually his first love. When it's time to exchange the rings, he gets so embarrassed by the goofy smile stuck on his face that he literally has to fight to hide it. He puts on a super serious face just to keep a lid on the massive joy bubbling up inside him during their vows. But completely wrapped up in his own hype, he totally missed a crucial piece of info about his new bride. Elric had zero clue that this whole forced arrangement might actually be breaking Tyria's heart. Time skips forward and the scene shifts to a heavy, rainy night outside the massive family estate. Inside one of the bedrooms, a single candle slowly burns away in the quiet dark. Elric nervously plays with his wedding band, still trying to process how ridiculously fast everything went down. Lying there, he breaks into a shy smile, thinking about how this super refined girl is actually his wife now. But then, the memory of his dad calling her the daughter of Baron Wibbin echoes super loud in his brain again. And as the pieces of that conversation start coming back, the kid's smile slowly fades away. After all, no matter how much he tries to look at the situation from every possible angle, the math just isn't mathing. Tossing and turning, Elric decides to just straight up ask the head maid why a noble would ever marry a merchant's kid. The maid, Rhonda, looks away and hesitates big time, making it super obvious that the question makes her uncomfortable. Noticing her acting shady, Elric pushes harder and begs her to just spill the whole truth once and for all. Rhonda stays quiet for a second, looking like she's mentally wrestling with the weight of this huge secret. Finally, she breaks it to the young master that this whole thing is nothing but a marriage of convenience. She explains that even though the Wibbin family used to have tons of clout and cash back in the day, right now they are drowning in debt and completely broke. Because of that, the MC's dad made the marriage a hard condition for paying off the noble's debts and giving them the financial bailout they desperately needed. She adds that through this wedding, the Portman merchants will finally level up their social standing and break into the aristocracy. Mind blown by the truth, Elric asks if realistically they literally just bought the girl, and Rhonda's sad silence is all the confirmation he needs. He completely panics as the terrible reality hidden behind his wedding day joy finally clicks. Crushed by a massive wave of guilt, he starts agonizing over the kind of shady stuff his own dad was capable of pulling. Unable to keep his feelings in check, Elric violently throws the bedroom doors open, leaving a stressed-out Rhonda behind. He starts sprinting down the mansion's hallways like a madman, feeling this desperate need to explain himself. The only thing the kid wants in that moment of pure panic is to find Tyria and give her a genuinely honest apology for what happened. He races against the clock, super anxious, hunting for any excuse or reason that might make this awful situation a little less terrible. Out of breath from sprinting, the kid has to lean against the hallway wall just to remember how to breathe. He's doubling over from exhaustion, but the urge to talk to her won't let him quit right now. With his heart pounding and sweat pouring down his face, he keeps moving with heavy breaths as he gets closer to her room. Finally, he stops right in front of the huge, fancy, decorated doors of the guest room she's staying in. Just as he touches the wood to push it open, Elric notices it's slightly cracked and hears a muffled sound coming from inside. Peeking quietly through the gap, he completely freezes when he hears the faint sound of crying. Inside, young Tyria is sitting there with a bright red face, shedding tears of pure misery. She's curled up on the floor of the dark room, hugging her knees while crying softly all by herself. The sound of her pain absolutely shatters Elric's heart, and he goes into shock seeing his new wife looking so broken. Right at the moment he sees her sobbing so tragically, the kid decides to take a step back and walk away. In that very second, he makes an extreme decision, silently swearing to himself that he'd find a way to cancel this miserable marriage. The story jumps to the next day, showing Elric's dad casually signing new business contracts like it's no big deal. While the guy is calmly doing his paperwork in his fancy office, fast and loud footsteps echo down the hall. Suddenly, Elric kicks the doors wide open and yells for his dad with a voice full of pure outrage. Without skipping a beat, the kid demands right then and there that this forced union be permanently annulled. He directly confronts his dad about the harsh reality that Tyria was only bought to save her family from going bankrupt. With eyes full of desperation and pain, the kid begs from the bottom of his soul for the patriarch to reverse his call. But the old man just slowly turns around and drops the kid's name in a super cold, razor-sharp tone. He glares at his son with a terrifying look and demands he stop acting like a spoiled brat immediately. The patriarch stands up, looking intimidating as heck, and reminds the boy that they are part of the elite now and he needs to start acting like it. That deeply cold stare, totally empty of any love, hits the young MC like a physical punch. This whole scene makes Elric remember, with deep resentment, the harsh and miserable reality he always dealt with in that house. After all, he always carried the heavy burden of his own dad, blaming him for his mom's passing during childbirth. In the patriarch's eyes, Elric was never anything more than a puppet, a tool with no dreams of his own, used solely to level up the family's power. Faced with that much coldness and disrespect, the kid realizes there's no point in talking anymore and decides to walk out on his dad for good. He finally accepts the sad truth that he never meant anything to his creator other than a business asset. It's during this moment of massive heartbreak that he firmly decides he needs to vanish from that estate as fast as humanly possible. He figured doing this would both free the poor girl who was basically sold and permanently wreck his dad's grand schemes. To make sure his getaway works, the kid decides to drop the Portman name and leave behind everything tying him to that greedy bloodline. That very same night, a crazy heavy rain starts pouring mercilessly over the huge wheat fields in the area. Out in the pouring rain, the boy starts his escape route without looking back, carrying nothing but a backpack and a blade at his waist. Walking through the pitch black, he still catches himself wondering about the real reasons Tyria was crying her eyes out in that room. Elric asks himself if her pain was because she was bought, because she had to leave home, or just because she hated the idea of being married to him. But he's fully aware that no matter how hard he looks for those answers, he can't take back his choice now. So he pushes those doubts out of his head and decides to keep running toward the unknown. Many years fly by, and the narrative jumps to a huge, epic stone fortress under a gray, rainy sky. A buff guy with gray hair spots someone walking up and asks, totally surprised, who the heck is out there in the rain? Looking at the mysterious young guy standing in front of him, the man asks if he seriously traveled all the way to the fort just to become a mercenary. Rocking a super focused look and showing zero hesitation, the boy answers yes with absolute confidence. Right after, he introduces himself with his new battle alias, declaring that from now on he only goes by Kasha. Leaving his entire past in the dust, he spent 10 long years surviving in war zones, swinging his blade with ruthless aggression. Moving non-stop from one battlefield to the next, he ended up getting famous everywhere as the terrifying Sword Demon. That scary reputation was honestly the only mystery left of that vulnerable kid who used to go by Elric. Right now, he's staring at the sunset after wrapping up yet another brutal clash, thinking about his long, rough journey. Despite his fierce rep, his eyes still show a ton of sadness about the lonely path he chose to walk. Off in the distance, a massive enemy squad starts getting into battle formation for the next inevitable push. But our brave MC stands completely alone in the valley, ready to take on the incoming opposing battalion head-on. He grips his massive, shiny sword, which reflects the last golden rays of the late afternoon sun. In the blink of an eye, the soldier pulls off a fast and devastating swing, taking down his opponents with flawless precision. With his face covered in battle marks, Kasha keeps a stone-cold expression, completely focused on staying in one piece amidst the chaos. The story then takes us inside a busy tavern, packed with customers happily chatting about recent news. The owner looks over at the door, pleasantly surprised as the bell chimes softly. He immediately throws a friendly greeting at the new customer who just walked in using a walking cane. It's Elric, currently wearing regular civilian clothes and needing a cane to walk because of his injuries, moving forward with a serious face and an obvious limp. He crosses the room in silence, while several curious regulars drinking there keep a close eye on him. Some of the customers recognize him right away and start whispering, wondering if he's the legendary Sword Demon who had gone MIA from the distant front lines. They act totally shocked and wonder if the fearsome soldier caught a permanent leg injury to end up in such a weakened state. Elric walks up to the counter, and the bartender, stressing over his condition, asks what awful thing happened to make him limp like that. The MC downplays the whole thing, explaining it was just a minor battlefield hiccup, something the bartender figures is pretty standard for a veteran. While grabbing a newspaper to catch up on the times, the young guy calmly mentions he'll be dealing with this physical limit for a good chunk of his journey. Suddenly, Elric crushes the newspaper with intense force after spotting a shocking and completely unexpected headline on the page. The owner notices the customer's sudden mood swing and nervously calls out to him after seeing that quiet burst of rage. But the young man is completely frozen, his eyes red with pure anger glued to the newspaper article. The report featured the exact picture and name of his late father, Hovan Portman, officially printed right there in the obituaries. Right after, the sharp whistle of a steam train echoes through the mountains under the golden afternoon light. The train speeds down the tracks, cutting through the breathtaking mountain scenery of that peaceful area. Sitting comfortably in his cabin, Elric stares thoughtfully at the massive landscape rushing past the train window. He thinks bitterly about how his late dad's face was published so quietly, basically ignored in the corner of that piece of paper. The official note confirmed the passing of Hovan Portman, the guy who caused the deepest and most traumatic scars in his entire life. Elric thinks back to when he ran away from home at 14, and how deep down he still had this innocent hope that his dad would come looking for him somehow. He admits that since he was just a scared, inexperienced kid back then, it was a childish thought that didn't make much sense in the real world. But even looking back on it today, he still feels like that tiny sliver of hope wasn't totally crazy in his kid brain. After all, even though he was treated like a business puppet, and his dad was indirectly responsible for his mom's passing, there was still an undeniable bond there. He knows that no matter how much he tried to push it all away with his massive resentment, he was ultimately still that man's rightful heir. Somewhere in his bitter heart, the boy really wanted his dad to show at least a tiny bit of genuine care for him before checking out. But he gets that it was just a kid's fantasy, and now that the guy has passed on, the main target of his grudge is gone from the world. He realizes that right now, there's only a fearful side of himself left, using his dad's passing as an excuse to quietly sneak back to his childhood home. With his soul full of regrets and a huge hole in his heart, the soldier listens to the train brakes squeal as he rolls into his old hometown. The train finally stops at its destination at Wibbon Station, the exact spot where his whole painful journey started 10 years ago. A gentle breeze blows across the bright, massive wheat fields under the red late afternoon sky. Elric steps onto the platform and takes a deep breath of his old hometown air, looking super sad and zoned out. He walks slowly down the dirt road through the fields, noticing that absolutely nothing has changed here after 10 whole years away. The roads are still peaceful and painted with that classic autumn, red from the dry leaves quietly falling from the trees. He watches the locals harvesting without a care in the world in this super cozy setting, which feels light years away from his brutal daily grind of combat. The chill vibe of the village shows zero signs of that insane survival pressure he faced every single day on the front lines. He keeps up his slow pace, setting the rhythm with the constant, painful thud of his limping steps on the dirt floor. Suddenly, a cool, gentle breeze hits his face, giving him an instant feeling of peace and drawing out a small smile after so long. The massive wheat fields, which were always the biggest symbol of the Wibbin farm, are still completely untouched by time. That golden view brings back happy childhood memories, back when he'd casually play hide-and-seek with the other village kids. He also fondly remembers getting scolded by the mansion's maids for coming back with his clothes covered in dirt after his daily adventures. With every step on that rustic road, his past memories seem to flash before his eyes with shocking clarity and intensity. He whispers thoughtfully about how powerful these memories are, trying to wrap his head around the mixed feelings they still stir up in his damaged heart. But the warrior's slow walk is suddenly put on pause when he spots something surprising a bit further down the dirt road. Our MC zeroes in on some women's voices that start echoing faintly from the middle of the crops. He can't help but think of the lovely Miss Tyria and wonder if she managed to live a good, happy life during all those years he was gone. Elric smiles, making peace with the idea that someone so beautiful and delicate must have definitely been courted and married off to some great, high-status guy by now. It's right then that he notices a super soft hand gently touching the golden wheat ears incredibly close to where he's standing. His eyes go wide in total shock when he hears a maid scream Tyria's name right in the middle of the field. He turns around, shaking, and sees, just a few steps away, Tyria herself holding a bundle of wheat while a stressed-out maid runs over to help her carry it. The maid jumps when she realizes this random guy leaning on a cane is staring at them, turning to Elric with a confused and worried face. Elric stares at the girl intensely, struggling to believe he's actually standing in front of Tyria again after such a massive amount of time. Exactly at that moment, the maid rushes over and nervously calls out for her boss while moving super fast. The MC is incredibly confused, wondering why on earth she would still be living such a humble lifestyle on this estate. Completely skeptical of the whole situation, Elric asks her straight up why she's still sticking around this place. A little awkwardly, Tyria explains that the reason she's still here is because she is still legally his wife. Hearing her say this so calmly, the guy feels like the biggest idiot on the planet for all the impulsive stuff he pulled when he was younger. He realizes how naive he was for thinking the forced marriage would just magically vanish just because he ran away. After all, if the arranged marriage was that easy to cancel, she never would have been sold off to his family in the first place. He asks himself if his selfish actions back then ended up trapping this poor woman and stealing every last drop of her independence for good. The MC realizes that bottom line, he completely failed at acting sensibly and doing right by the people around him. He understands that he failed epically at protecting his own ego and worse, at offering even the bare minimum of support or respect to the woman he married. He sees himself as nothing but a coward for running away from his family duties in such an immature way. While he burned through 10 years fighting and swinging his sword aimlessly in war zones, she quietly tanked all the consequences. He thinks about how lonely, tough, and painful her daily life must have been during all those years of total abandonment in the mansion. Even feeling an urgent need to beg her for forgiveness for everything, the MC starts doubting his own right to do so. He wonders if he even has the right to apologize, and if she'd actually be willing to accept sorries from the guy who left her behind. Super uncomfortable and totally embarrassed, he tries to mumble a few words to get a conversation going. Tyria just stares at him in absolute silence, keeping a calm, unreadable face under her giant straw hat. Showing zero signs of being annoyed, she practically suggests they head inside the house so they can talk about it properly. Right after, she starts a peaceful walk back to the mansion, letting him follow right behind her on the dirt path. Elric tags along quietly, feeling incredibly tense and super awkward because of how unexpectedly calm she's being. Deep down, he desperately wished she would at least get mad or yell at him for all the pain he caused. After all, her extreme lack of reaction felt like it was hiding a resentment way worse than any anger management outburst. On the way to the huge farm under the reddish sky, he keeps wondering what on earth is actually waiting for him. Suddenly, he notices movement coming from the house's entrance and turns his head quickly, looking surprised. His eyes go wide as he spots a very familiar silhouette walking out the front door of the mansion. Tyria keeps moving toward the entrance, while the MC falls a bit behind on the dirt road because of his bad leg. She notices him obviously hesitating, stops walking, and politely asks if he's going to come inside with her. Caught off guard by the unexpected softness in her voice, Elric clears his throat and tries to bounce back from his mini freakout fast. He replies that he's on his way and grips his cane tight, speeding up his limping walk to try and catch up. They finally step into the grand mansion, and a young maid politely asks them to wait a sec while she goes to fetch the butler. Tyria waits patiently in the entrance hall, keeping a firm grip on the bundle of golden wheat she picked in the fields. The maid hurries out of the room, pushing the big inner doors open to go do her job. Elric uses the quick moment of silence to take a good look at the luxurious place around him. He's amazed to see that, even after 10 years away, the inside of the giant mansion looks exactly the same as it used to. Every tiny decorative detail sparks deep, nostalgic memories of his chaotic younger days there. Even the exact number of windows and the spot of every scratch on the walls come back to him with crazy clarity. Feeling so nostalgic and realizing time basically hit pause here, our MC can't help but crack a faint, sneaky smile. But his trip down memory lane gets totally interrupted when a strict woman's voice asks who he is. Elric turns around, startled, facing that stern tone that sounds super familiar to his childhood ears. A sharply dressed woman with glasses and a formal maid uniform walks up slowly and seriously asks who he's here to see. The MC goes into total shock when he realizes the woman standing there is none other than Rhonda, his loyal old head maid. He notices that, even after a full decade, she hasn't changed her strict vibe or perfect posture one bit. Flashing a little smile, the guy casually asks if she really can't recognize him. Rhonda stares hard at him, clearly confused by such a personal question coming from some random dude with a cane. But as she focuses on his distinct features, it finally clicks, and her eyes go wide in absolute shock. Rhonda looks totally floored and mumbles, "Young master," as she watches him smile back at her affectionately. With shaking hands and tears in her eyes, she asks if the man standing in front of her is really her beloved boy Elric. He gives her a massive hug and softly says it's been a long time, but he's finally back home. Holding back tears, the dedicated maid gets emotional seeing that the boy she helped raise made it back safe. She says, amazed, that he's changed so much over this decade that it was almost impossible to recognize him at first glance. The MC smiles warmly and agrees that he really did change a lot, making her reaction completely understandable. But suddenly, a super weird thought pops into Elric's head, leaving him thinking hard and feeling confused. He remembers perfectly how Tyria said just a few minutes ago that she stayed on the estate because she was his real wife. He thinks about how today, he's a hardened guy who spent 10 years fighting in brutal war zones. Rhonda notices him zoning out and nervously asks if something's wrong right now. He deduces that his features changed so much that even the maid who treated him like a son had a super hard time recognizing him right away. Keeping that in mind, the MC asks himself how it was even possible for his bride to know exactly who he was with zero hesitation. Sweat drips down his forehead as he tries to crack this massive puzzle around Tyria's reaction. He literally cannot figure out how the girl managed to recognize his face instantly after so much time apart. Time skips ahead and the scene shifts inside a fancy bedroom in the mansion, where white curtains blow gently in the breeze. Tyria is standing by the massive glass window, quietly looking out at the gorgeous late afternoon view. She closely watches the conversation between Elric and the maid happening down below in the estate's garden. The MC realizes he's being watched from above, spins around fast, and ends up with a bright red face over the whole thing. Realizing she got busted spying, the girl jumps back in a panic and puts her hand to her chest, her heart beating like crazy. She tries to catch her breath while leaning against the wall, her face turning completely red from embarrassment. The story then highlights the massive, noticeable scar Elric has on the back of his neck. It also focuses on his long brown hair and his heavy gaze that carries the weight of everything he's been through. In Tyria's eyes, absolutely nothing seemed to have changed in the vibe, and the look of that boy she knew so well back in the day. Later, Elric chills in a fancy hot bath, but he's still stuck thinking about the whole "how did she recognize me" mystery. During his bath, he tries to find any logical reason for how his wife identified him so easily after 10 years. Finally, he decides to get out of the warm water, making a soft splashing sound as his feet hit the wet bathroom floor. The MC throws on his white bathrobe and goes to tie the belt, but nearly jumps out of his skin when he hears the door fly open. He turns his head, totally bewildered, eyes wide at the unexpected guest standing right in front of him. It's Tyria, casually walking into the room wearing nothing but a white towel wrapped around her after shower. Seeing him standing right there in the same private space, her cheeks instantly turn bright red from awkwardness. Freaking out over getting caught, she tries to cover up more and starts stuttering a million apologies for the mix-up. Noticing she's about to burst into tears from sheer embarrassment, Elric tries to calm her down fast so she doesn't panic. He waves his hands nervously and begs her not to cry over this super awkward situation. But the heavy, embarrassing vibe between the newlyweds seems to get worse with every second of silence in that steamy room. To officially make things 100 times worse, a new redhead maid opens the door holding a laundry basket and lets out a massive scream seeing them like that. Totally terrified by the scene, the maid drops everything on the floor and bolts as fast as she can down the mansion's halls. She screams frantically for help outside, having zero clue what the heck is actually going down in that room. Acting super fast to hide his wife from any nosy onlookers, Elric pulls Tyria in and hugs her tight. But this unplanned, sudden physical contact just makes both of their faces burn even redder with intense embarrassment. With teary eyes from the shock, the girl can only whisper the maid's name in a state of total panic. Trying to handle the mess somehow, the MC tries to come up with a weak excuse, claiming he only grabbed her to keep her from slipping on the wet floor. The narrative then throws us back to the dark days of conflict at the Shever Defense Barrier, where the 5th Battalion of Sentinels is stationed. One of the brave warriors stares at the landscape ahead with a sharp, ruthless look under the pouring rain. From the enemy side, the terrifying frontline knight of the Imperial Army, LeBron, shows up leading the elite strike team with a scary smirk on his face. With battle cries echoing everywhere, the troops follow orders to push forward full force to wipe out the region's defense army. LeBron taunts the enemies, screaming, lifting his giant blade, and promising he'll slice up every single guy without a shred of mercy. In a super brutal attack, the strong rival leader starts taking down multiple guards at once, making a mess on the soaked ground. Panicking over the insane power gap, the remaining fighters yell that there's no way they can beat that armored tank. With no other smart play to stop the chaos, the higher-ups order an immediate retreat of all squads behind the defense barrier. But walking in the exact opposite direction of all that mass panic, the fearless Cassius strolls calmly toward the danger with his heavy weapon resting on his shoulder. The enemy soldiers spot the mysterious warrior from a distance and whisper to each other, wondering if he's just another random merc hired by Shever. Totally ignoring the enemy chatter, our guy gets into his fighting stance and raises his heavy blade. Cassius keeps his ice-cold stare locked on the opponents, showing an incredible calmness right before the clash. Immediately, one of the Empire's gutsy soldiers charges at him aggressively, gripping his sword tight and rocking a cruel smile. But our MC blocks the strike effortlessly and gets right into position to deliver a fatal counter. He handles his massive weapon with total confidence, keeping a completely unbothered face while he dominates the duel. With a precise, deadly move, he hits the enemy's throat, dealing a critical strike in the rain. The injured warrior drops his weapon and falls to his knees, totally crushed by the MC's overwhelming power. Cassius spins his blade fast and completely defeats the enemy with one swift strike. The guy's helmet rolls into the mud in front of his buddies, sending the Empire's fighters into absolute chaos. The other soldiers watching freeze in pure panic and start sweating cold at the sight of that massive strength. Standing next to the fallen guy on the ground, the fighter officially introduces himself as Cassius, Shever's legendary mercenary. He dares the remaining enemies to push up if they've got the guts, promising he'll cut down every last one of them without a second thought. But suddenly, a chill runs down his spine as he senses a fatal danger speeding right toward him. The MC reacts in a split second and pops his mana defense, trying to shield himself from the surprise attack. But a powerful blast violently smashes through his defensive barrier and nails his left knee dead on. Feeling unbearable pain, the guy drops to his knees and uses his own sword like a crutch, so he doesn't totally collapse into the mess on the ground. Cassius grits his teeth and looks up with extreme difficulty, trying to figure out where that devastating shot came from. At the top of a nearby cliff, two mysterious figures silently watch the fight unfold down below. It's a duo in weird gear with their faces covered, and the woman is holding a sniper rifle that's still smoking. The MC jolts awake with wide eyes, letting out a gasp of pure terror after reliving that awful nightmare. Elric jumps up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat, holding a knife defensively against thin air. He breathes hard, his heart racing a mile a minute, still fighting to shake off the traumatic flashbacks of battle. The guy stares at the blade in his shaking hands, trying to figure out where he is and calm his combat reflexes. Slowly, the sunlight shining into the huge, fancy bedroom starts making the room feel real again. He finally realizes he's not in the war zone anymore, and that he actually made it back home safe. Suddenly, a knock at the door makes him jump, and his pure instinct makes him point his weapon right at the sound. Out in the hall, a respectful voice asks if the young master is awake yet, while he stays frozen in the giant bed. Elric hesitates for a split second and stays quiet, trying to get his heavy breathing under control before answering. He finally replies calmly that yes, he's up. While confirming he just woke up, the MC quickly hides the knife behind his back so he doesn't look suspicious. One of the dedicated maids walks into the room carrying a wooden basin full of water so he can wash up. The MC remembers that right after he asked for cold water to wash with, a bowl of freezing water was brought to him ASAP. He puts on clothes that are surprisingly soft and comfortable, feeling like he's basically wearing nothing compared to the heavy armor from his past. Looking at himself in the mirror while leaning on his cane, Elric thinks that living in all this luxury feels like a reward he doesn't deserve. The MC tries to force a fake smile at his reflection, but the face looking back seems super weird and unnatural to him. He starts a slow walk, wondering if all that time suffering in the war didn't just turn his face into stone. The head maid, Rhonda, opens the doors and compliments the young lord's look, suggesting they kick off the day with an awesome breakfast. She stands tall with her usual flawless, classy posture, waiting for him to follow. Noticing the MC's limp, the maid worriedly asks what happened to his leg, and he lies, saying he just took a clumsy tumble down a steep hill. In his head, the MC remembers how he actually got hurt in the fight and admits he could never tell her there's a bullet stuck in his knee, just to avoid stressing everyone out for no reason. Rhonda jokes that he's still just as accident-prone as he was back in the day, making the guy laugh awkwardly as he remembers yesterday's super embarrassing bathroom mix-up. As they walk down the mansion's halls, light footsteps start echoing, and a very anticipated silhouette appears walking toward them. The soft features and long blonde hair of his young wife show up under the soft light shining through the windows. Tyria appears looking gorgeous and sweetly asks if he managed to sleep well during the night. But seeing his wife instantly reminds the MC of the moment he saw her stepping out of the shower wrapped in just a towel. Completely mortified and blushing hard, he can barely form a decent sentence after getting called a pervert over that whole fiasco. The young maid Marie points her finger dramatically and yells that he's a total creep, while Tyria looks super uncomfortable right behind her. Having zero patience for the drama, Rhonda smacks Marie hard on the head and scolds her severely for peeping into other people's bathrooms. While dragging the loudmouth maid away by her collar, the head maid politely wishes the young man a pleasant stay in the mansion. Feeling a bit awkward about the chaotic welcome, Elric clears his throat to try and kill the awkward tension. He tries to flash a friendly smile and says good morning to his wife, casually mentioning that he slept great. Looking around the cozy dining room, the MC notices Marie isn't there and asks what the new maid's name is, since he doesn't remember her from his last visit. But he practically spits out his food and slaps the table in shock when Tyria brings up the incident where the maid labeled him a pervert. Desperate to kill the conversation, our MC waves his hands frantically and insists she shouldn't stress over it. He grips his cane tight, trying to regain his cool in this super awkward situation. With his face noticeably red, Elric tries to explain himself, saying it was just a dumb question since he'd never bumped into the girl before. Tyria looks at him with narrowed, observant eyes, giving off the vibe that she's not really buying that rushed excuse. An awkward silence takes over the room right after, as the couple starts eating breakfast side by side. His young wife quietly enjoys her meal and chews slowly, seeming to ignore the heavy vibe hanging in the air. Suddenly, she brings up a touchy subject, putting the MC on high alert instantly. Taking advantage of the opening, Elric steps up and decides to finally clear the air about yesterday's awful misunderstanding. Tyria shyly asks if he's talking about the bathroom incident, feeling her cheeks heat up that exact second. The MC tries to stutter out an official apology, but she cuts him off quickly with a nervous wave to kill the conversation. Still super embarrassed, the girl just asks him to focus on eating and finish his breakfast already. Tyria turns her head and grips her dress with shaking hands, completely flustered by the whole intimate mess. She stays dead quiet, blushing hard, unable to look her husband in the eye. Seeing the vibe getting heavier by the second, our MC scratches the back of his neck and mentally curses himself for even bringing it up. He remembers how he was only wearing a bathrobe in the bathroom and realizes he ended up exposing way too much. Elric bitterly thinks about the ton of deep scars covering his body, wondering if she was totally grossed out by the marks of his brutal war past. They both keep eating in a silence so loud you can only hear the clinking of silverware hitting the plates. The MC seriously regrets not just sweeping the whole thing under the rug, feeling like this awkward atmosphere is going to drive them both crazy. Desperate to escape as fast as possible, he starts shoveling food into his mouth in a totally panicked rush. With his cheeks completely stuffed, the young guy hastily wipes his mouth while his wife watches him in pure shock at his sudden lack of manners. Throwing up a thumbs up, the guy mumbles with a full mouth that he's heading out and tells her to enjoy the rest of her meal. He jumps up quickly and bolts from the dining room, shutting the wooden door behind him with a soft click. Tyria stares at the closed door for a sec and lets out a soft, shy sigh at her husband's random behavior. Still blushing, she looks out the sunny window and mentally wishes him a great day. Stepping into the main hall after breakfast, Elric notices that the massive Portman estate is already up and running, packed with staff getting to work. Under the watchful eye of head maid Rhonda, the MC starts greeting all the houseworkers, who welcome him back with genuine smiles and good vibes. But one cheeky worker asks if it's true he tried to jump the boss lady yesterday, making another guy scold him, reminding him they're married and hyping up the young master's manliness. Suddenly, young Marie storms into the hallway looking furious and screams at the top of her lungs that the MC is nothing but a massive creep. She indignantly demands that the other workers wake up and stop defending the guy's shady behavior. The young maid keeps making a scene, shouting that he dipped for a decade only to come back acting like this, but she gets cut off when a firm hand grabs her shoulder. It's the old man Aldio popping up with a smile, telling her not to be so harsh on the young master since she's still too young to get how this stuff works. The veteran butler casually explains that a noble's #1 duty is making sure they get a solid heir for the family bloodline. Aldio enthusiastically argues that Elric was just faithfully doing his husbandly duties in the bathroom, and that he proved he's a true noble by not forgetting his responsibilities even after 10 years away. The MC is absolutely mortified by this cringeworthy conversation, while Marie keeps loudly protesting that he's the worst kind of degenerate. The nice old man ignores the girl's rants, and hopefully asks if the young master is finally back home for good, making Elric let out a super awkward laugh. Gripping his cane tight, our MC quietly thinks to himself that honestly, he still hasn't made any plans for his future. He knows his bad knee is gonna force him to stay at the mansion for a while, but he wonders how the heck he's supposed to act like the real boss of this beautiful farm, surrounded by golden wheat fields after being gone for so long. Trying to change the subject, Elric says he needs to handle some business right now and they'll chat later, getting a respectful nod from Aldio, who is hyped about his return. Right after, the young master orders the veteran butler to get the carriage ready so he can leave immediately. A little later, the carriage starts rolling smoothly down the dirt road, cutting through the massive golden fields of the farm. From the middle of the wheat field, Tyria quietly watches the carriage slowly drive off toward the edge of the property. She holds her big straw hat against the light breeze, keeping a thoughtful, kinda sad look on her face as she stares at the horizon. Seen from above, the carriage takes its lonely trip down the road lined with the bright autumn colors covering the area. The vehicle finally parks at an isolated spot on the hill, and Elric steps out to walk slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. The guy stares at the quiet scenery with a face full of sadness and whispers to himself that it really has been a long time. He stops in front of Hovan Portman's massive stone tomb and whispers the word father with deep pain, staring at the headstone under the bright sky. Standing at the grave, our MC quietly reflects on how he used to carry a massive grudge against his late dad. But he admits he never wanted their reunion to happen in such a cold, sad way. Hovan Portman was an insanely driven guy who leveled up the family from simple merchants to Wibbon's top guild, but his ruthless chill also earned him a ton of enemies over his life. The MC wonders if the patriarch ever once gave him a real smile or a single loving word, concluding that he should have lived a bit longer if he wanted to play the villain all the way to the end. He locks eyes with the crest carved into the tombstone and silently regrets that his dad checked out so early. With a soft sigh, Elric decides to look away from the grave and gets ready to turn his back on the place under the blue sky. The young man admits to himself that he doesn't carry that past bitterness and hate that used to eat away at his heart anymore. The MC then slowly turns around and calls out to Aldio, who is patiently waiting a bit further back. He flat out asks how his dad passed away, and the loyal butler says it was a serious heart condition that got him. Elric is shocked to find out the old man hid the truth about his health until the very end, leaving only the private doctor and Aldio in the loop. The butler goes on explaining that once Hoven realized his days were numbered, he put all his energy into wrapping up and liquidating his businesses. With a slightly sarcastic smile, the young guy mentions he thinks the butler is a weird guy and asks what he saw in such a cold dude to stay so loyal. Without missing a beat, Aldio smiles back and jokes that he did it all for the money, asking what other reason he could possibly have. The MC gives him a suspicious look and points out that he still hasn't asked the most important question of all. He's talking about where the heck all the assets and cash went that his dad rushed sold before kicking the bucket. The guy keeps a straight face while waiting for the big reveal about where the massive family fortune is hiding. The old butler then drops the bomb that the entire fortune the dad piled up was left 100% to him, the rightful heir. The carriage starts moving again, rolling slowly down the dirt road cutting through the beautiful autumn forest. Sitting comfortably inside the ride, Elric asks the driver if his dad really didn't leave any formal written will. Aldio replies that the deceased wasn't the type to do something like that, confirming there are just a few written guidelines about how to split things up, offering to show him if he's curious. Gripping his cane tight, the MC listens to the butler admit that his late dad's real intentions are still a huge mystery to everyone. The driver adds that the old boss handled the whole thing with a level of coldness they'd never seen before, leaving our MC deep in thought. As the carriage rolls through the golden crops, the old man advises the kid to take all the time he needs to figure out what to do with the inheritance. The guy focuses his red eyes on the landscape and starts connecting the dots regarding his family's current situation. A weird question pops into his head as he watches the wheat fields pass by the carriage window. Elric wonders why his wife is still hanging around the mansion, considering the arranged marriage should have been called off after he ghosted for 10 years. From outside, Aldio mentions that the marriage was strictly political, basically a business deal wearing a trench coat disguised as a union between two noble families. The young guy asks if that alone is enough of a reason, but the old man cuts him off, remembering a super important detail he forgot to drop. He reveals that the Portman bloodline has now leveled up to a hereditary barony, and that prestigious title will be passed down to the MC the second he claims the inheritance. The butler makes it super clear that all the wealth belongs exclusively to him by right, not to the young lady living on the farm. The carriage finally parks right in front of the family's epic, fancy mansion. Stepping out, Elric figures that if money was Tyria's only motivation, she would have bounced a long time ago, considering it's been a year since his dad passed. He realizes that, if she wanted to, the girl could have claimed the fortune as the legal rep in Bylade, which proves her staying at the estate was a completely personal choice. The young master asks the driver if he has any clue why his wife made such a weird call. Aldio sighs and explains that the young lady is super private, admitting they were never close enough to share personal secrets. He describes the bride as someone with a noble vibe who is hard to get close to, making it impossible for a simple servant to question her motives. Elric agrees she seems like a tough person to figure out, pointing out she's still a total stranger to him since they've only met face-to-face once. The old man gives the horse a little pat and wisely notes that, honestly, almost every arranged marriage starts exactly like this. The MC starts climbing the stone steps with difficulty, putting all his injured body weight onto his cane. At the top of the stairs, he spots Tyria leaning against one of the massive pillars, looking pretty shy about him showing up. The girl hides her red face under the brim of her giant hat, showing how incredibly awkward she still feels around her husband. She grips her dress tight, showing how super shy and anxious she is inside about this unplanned meetup. Walking a bit wobbly, the young bride starts slowly making her way to the front door. Noticing her, Elric takes the lead and politely asks if she just got back from her walk. Caught off guard, Tyria blushes hard and asks, totally surprised, when exactly he got back from his trip. She holds a small sack of wheat and shyly explains she just finished her daily grind in the fields. Our MC feels his own face heat up from being so close to his wife and tries to play off how insanely nervous he is around her. He friendly suggests they head inside the mansion together, and the girl instantly agrees with a little nod. The couple starts walking up the fancy indoor stairs side by side, trapped in a silence packed with embarrassment and tension. Elric side-eyes her while mentally cursing his own mouth for always coming up with the weirdest, most awkward conversation starters. Walking next to Tyria, Elric notices that even wearing basic farm clothes, she gives off this natural, super elegant noble vibe. He catches himself wondering if she already had that striking, proud posture 10 years ago when they tied the knot. The guy vaguely remembers how his bride looked on their wedding day, back when she seemed like a shy but bright noble girl. Suddenly, a loud noise snaps him back to reality, making him jump out of his skin mid-thought. Thanks to his bad leg, the MC ends up stumbling clumsily and scares his wife, who worriedly asks if he's alright. Elric slams his cane hard on the floor to catch his balance and dodge an embarrassing wipeout. He forces a super awkward smile and lies, saying he's doing great, claiming his legs just gave out for a sec from the long walk, all while wondering how long she's been watching him limp like that. The guy apologizes for not being able to carry the wheat sack for her because of his messed up leg as they keep climbing the stairs. Tyria says it's totally fine and she's used to it, which makes the MC feel incredibly embarrassed and awkward for ditching her for so long and only now offering a super late apology. His young wife stares at him with those striking golden eyes, giving off a deep, serious calmness. She explains she meant she got used to the hard work because she learned everything straight from the late boss of the Portman family. Shocked by the news, Elric mumbles that being strict and demanding the max from everyone was definitely his dead dad's classic style. The guy remembers that Patriarch Hovan Portman was a relentless dude who made a point to personally check every single part of his business, including the massive wheat fields. He figures that since his dad shut down all his other ventures, leaving only this farm, it made total sense he'd dump all the land management onto Tyria. Their footsteps finally stop as they reach the top of the stairs and stand at the end of the mansion's hallway. With a serious face, Elric hesitates for a second before bringing up a pretty personal topic with the girl. Standing right in front of Patriarch Hovan's massive portrait, the guy asks, looking curious, what his dad's final days were actually like. Tyria answers coldly and straight to the point that she only learned the farm work from him, admitting she remembers basically nothing besides their professional duties. Hearing his wife's distant answer, the MC grips the handle of his wooden cane even harder. He gathers his guts and asks if, by any chance, his dad ever brought up his name or asked about him during all that time. The girl gives a short, simple no, leaving the guy with a faint, sad smile at the confirmation of his dad's coldness. He silently thinks to himself that they were a weird, combone, emotionless dad, and a woman of few words making any chat between them strictly business. The young guy looks away, accepting the painful reality of the distant relationship he had with his late dad. Tyria asks to be excused so she can get back to her daily chores, leaving the guy confused because he thought she was already done for the day. She explains she still needs to go through all the paperwork in the office, making Elric completely shocked at the insane amount of responsibilities she's handling. The young master asks in disbelief if she seriously runs the wheat farm during the day and then reviews boring paperwork at night, and she shyly confirms yes. The young woman says her goodbyes, mentioning she'll see him again at dinner, and he just nods silently while watching her walk away. The guy stands frozen in the hallway, watching his wife leave with a look full of guilt. Right then, Elric is hit with a massive wave of guilt. Realizing all that workload should have been his job, he feels ashamed for living a selfish life while she suffered in his place. He figures his conscience would feel way lighter if she at least showed some anger or resentment toward him, but the girl never uttered a single complaint over all these years. Feeling the weight of his thoughts, our MC starts limping slowly toward the mansion's office. Suddenly, a loud crash from a nearby hallway grabs his attention and stops him in his tracks. He spots the clumsy Marie sprawled on the floor after tripping and dropping a wooden crate full of old mail, looking absolutely panicked. Marie cries, having no clue what to do about the mess, while the MC watches her with a confused face. He kneels down to help her pick up the scattered papers and takes the chance to ask what's inside all those sealed envelopes. The maid replies that they are old letters sent to her lady, making Elric grab one of the envelopes to take a closer look. The young master is pretty amazed by the massive pile of mail hoarded in that crate. But the guy's face drops instantly and his eyes go wide when he spots the sender on one of the letters. He realizes the messages were sent by the Wibben family, remembering the terms of the arranged marriage deal that sealed Tyria's fate. Our MC rips the letter open and carefully reads the text written by the young lady's father. In the message, Baron Wibben demands his daughter stop waiting for a husband who's never coming back and return home, even offering a new marriage to save her from more misery. Elric realizes his dad transferred the entire family fortune into his name, leaving his daughter-in-law without a single penny even after 10 years of exclusive dedication to the Portman estate. He tosses the letter on the wooden office desk, admitting that if his wife had just taken all the assets for herself, it would have been totally fair payback for her years of hard work. The guy sits at the desk, burying his head in his hands, asking himself if the real reason Tyria stayed was just to guard the wealth left by her late father-in-law. But he still can't wrap his head around why she'd dedicate herself so hard to a cause that wouldn't make her a dime. Elric stays kicked back in the fancy office chair, totally zoned out trying to figure out his wife's real motives. He stares off into space with his intense red eyes, hoping to find the answers he's looking for regarding her behavior. He deduces that if she was just in it for the cash, she would have grabbed the inheritance and bounced from the mansion a year ago, right after the patriarch died. The guy leans over the papers scattered on the desk, trying to crack the mystery behind her loyalty. He pulls open one of the desk drawers and finds a stack of saved letters, silently confirming his suspicions were spot on. The guy checks the letters and notices the messages from the Wibben family started rolling in exactly 1 year ago. He concludes that all the notes had the same goal of demanding the fortune his dad saved for him, and realizes his wife probably never replied to a single one, since the latest letters were practically begging for an answer. Elric lets out a long sigh mixed with a bitter smile at this whole crazy situation. He realizes Tyria had been loyally guarding the Portman fortune for an heir whose return was super sketchy and never guaranteed. Knowing that not even the loyal driver Aldio knew about these demands from his wife's family, the young guy figures the girl definitely pulled off a massive effort to hide the truth. Our MC sadly notes that his wife fought this brutal battle completely alone for the entire past year. He looks at Tyria working far away in the fields and respects the awesome grit and focus of this quiet girl. The young lord admits he'd have zero right to judge her if she had just taken the cash for herself, mentally wondering why she chose to take such a ridiculously hard path. Meanwhile, inside her private room, the young boss sits at her vanity and starts getting ready for the meeting her husband called. She gently fixes her blonde hair and ties a light satin ribbon in a bow at the back of her head. Wearing a super classy dark blue dress with lace, Tyria stares at her own reflection in the mirror with a very serious, thoughtful face. Suddenly, the new maid Marie bursts into the bedroom, her face bright red with excitement, celebrating that the moment has finally arrived. The maid claps her hands together and yells, super hyped, that the young lord finally manned up and asked for a private meeting with his wife. The girl makes a goofy face and complains that, even though his stunt in the bathroom was out of line, she remembers the veteran butler Aldio's wise advice. Marie loudly repeats that making an heir for the bloodline would also be great for the lady herself, making Tyria turn beet red and completely flustered by her boldness. Unable to hold back her crazy excitement, the maid starts happily skipping around the bedroom with short, bouncy steps. She suddenly gets close and grabs the skirt of her boss's fancy blue dress super tight. Kneeling on the rug, Marie dramatically begs her lady to follow the old butler's advice. The maid fake cries and warns that the young guy is a shameless pervert who could run away from the mansion any second since he left her before, insisting the best move is for them to lock it down for real. Making a super funny, dramatic face, the maid yells at the top of her lungs for the girl to hurry to bed with her husband and make a baby ASAP. Marie starts spinning crazy theories about having 2 kids exactly like the lady to stop anyone from inheriting the guy's runaway, pervy vibes, giving Tyria a massive cold sweat of embarrassment. Luckily for the young woman, loud knocks on the door cut off the clumsy maid's endless rant. Out in the hall, butler Aldio politely asks if she's ready for the meeting, and she quickly replies that she's leaving the room right now. The confident footsteps of Tyria and the butler start echoing down the grand wooden hallway as they walk to the meeting room. The girl walks downstairs feeling super anxious about what they're going to talk about, since this is the first time he's ever asked for a one-on-one with her. With gentle movements, Aldio grabs the gold handles and throws the huge double doors wide open for the young boss to walk in. The veteran worker formally announces the lady's arrival while Elric waits patiently, sitting at the table. The guy, who is calmly enjoying a cup of tea in front of the giant sunlit window, looks up and gives her a warm welcome. Tyria walks into the fancy tea room looking calm, but rocking a slightly red face from embarrassment. The click-clack of her heels echoes through the room as she gets closer to the tea table set up for them. The young man takes a final sip of his drink looking thoughtful, while he watches his wife take a seat across from him. Seen from above, the pair is sitting in the middle of this massive room, decorated with classic furniture and lit by the sun. Cutting right to the chase, Elric puts the paper on the table and asks for a genuine apology for reading her mail without asking, explaining he accidentally stumbled on it in the mess the maid made. He taps the sealed envelope and straight up asks if he has permission to ask her about what was written in those mysterious messages. Tyria's eyes go wide and she lets out a tiny gasp of shock, realizing her huge secret just got busted by her husband. She immediately tilts her head down, letting the shadow of her hair hide her face, which is suddenly full of stress. In silent panic, the girl is terrified the young guy will misread her real motives and start seeing her as some greedy, totally shady person who only cares about the inherited cash. The young man breaks the silence by calmly mentioning he noticed she spent all of last year formally ignoring all her family's demands. He gives her a serious look and admits he only called her here to drag an explanation out of her about why she protected his wealth so hard, even without any guarantee he'd ever come back alive. Elric points out that she could have easily claimed the entire estate for herself, without anyone being able to stop her or call her out for it. Deep down, the guy knows that, from her POV, he was basically a total stranger after 10 years of zero contact. He figures that the stubbornness of this girl he barely knew to protect the money of a husband who ghosted was still a puzzle his brain couldn't solve. He asks her to spill the truth about why she refused to go back to her old home in Wibbin, even with her dad pressuring her. With her face slightly in the shadows and her mouth shut tight, the girl whispers the family name in a firm, formal tone. She looks up with pure focus and declares with those striking gold eyes that her legal name right now is Tyria Portman. The girl proudly and powerfully states that she isn't the Lady of Wibbin anymore, but the true master and protector of the entire Portman estate. Not giving him a chance to say a word, she suddenly stands up and apologizes for having to leave so fast, claiming she still has a bunch of farm chores to wrap up. The young boss turns around and marches out of the room with fast, determined steps, leaving her drink completely untouched on the table. Elric stays stuck in his chair with sweat dripping down his face, completely mind-blown and frozen by his wife's majestic and totally unexpected flex. He stares blankly at the empty space she left in front of the sunny window, trying to process the sheer weight of that massive loyalty drop. Elric asks the woman why she chose to protect his cut of the wealth even without any guarantee he'd come back alive, pointing out she could have easily taken all the cash for her own benefit. Tyria hesitates for a split second and starts stuttering awkwardly, trying to find the perfect words to answer her husband. She clears her throat and her cheeks turn bright red as she tries to hold back her anxiety in front of him. Looking up with determination, the girl locks eyes with him using her striking golden irises and simply answers that she did it because she is his wife. Meanwhile, inside the office, Elric holds a small knife and thoughtfully stabs it into the wooden wall paneling. Sitting in his chair, the young lord quietly thinks over everything that just went down and his partner's real intentions. He remembers the girl's fierce declaration that she is now part of the Portman house and will take on the duty and burden of protecting that farm. The thud of the knife hitting the wall echoes through the quiet room while he stays lost in his own head. Elric asks himself if the real emotion hiding behind that cold, polite answer was just an aristocratic woman's sense of duty. He realizes she protected all the leftover assets not out of greed, but to fulfill her role, a selfless move that instantly reminds him of an old buddy from the past. The guy brings up the image of Elvis Graham in his mind, a dude who had a massive impact on his war days. Elric remembers running into Elvis in the war zones as the third heir of a powerful dynasty who hired him as a merc during a turf war. Even though they won with barely any casualties, it wasn't a flawless victory, since Elvis ended up taking severe damage that put him in a wheelchair for life. Even though he couldn't fight anymore, the noble kept his proud attitude and claimed he still needed to play his part in society. He used to say that aristocrats had a duty to be role models for everyone else, and that the battlefield was just the stage for him to practice his commitment. Back then, Elric even asked him if it wasn't kind of hypocritical to act like that when he was only the son of a mistress and half-commoner. Flashing a sarcastic smile, Elvis clapped back that he chose to see himself as half-noble, and by fulfilling half of his duties, he ended up losing half of his body. Sticking to his word, the man retired from the front lines for a peaceful life, and eventually got married a few years later. Snapping back to reality, our MC confidently pulls the knife out of the wood wall. He whispers to himself about the heavy weight of words like duty and obligation that seem to drive his wife's every move. Even admitting he'll never be able to make up for Tyria's decade of hard work, the guy knows he isn't totally helpless in this situation. Knowing the girl's greedy family will keep sending letters demanding cash, he figures their supposed physical absence is because of some roadblock, not a lack of trying. Convinced his wife will never spill her deepest feelings even if he pushes, Elric decides to take control of the situation himself. Luckily, the young guy comes up with a backdoor plan to uncover the whole truth hiding behind this mess once and for all. And so, a carriage takes a trip straight to the massive Wiben estate. Elric stops in front of the huge mansion's metal gates and figures the best play right now is a full frontal assault. The young lord walks smoothly across the lawn, admiring how epic the place looks and feeling super confident for the showdown ahead. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, the owners have already been tipped off about the visit and are trash-talking the young guy's nerve to finally show his face. Baron Wiben and his wife speedwalk through the halls, radiating pure hate for their daughter's husband and calling him a useless loser from humble roots. The Baron's wife angrily complains that he should have stayed gone forever and blames the guy for only coming back to snoop and snatch their daughter's money. Wearing a dark, greedy look, the patriarch dreads the chance that the kid might try to claim his legal rights to the cash Hoven left behind. The noble couple speedwalks to the drawing room to directly confront the guest nobody wanted. They march side by side through the grand rooms, dead set on stopping the guy from getting his hands on the Portman family fortune. The Baron complains, super annoyed, labeling his son-in-law a trash opportunist who only cares about the coins. His wife totally agrees and adds that the kid wasted 10 whole years of Tyria's life, dramatically bringing up how much money and effort they spent raising the girl. The greedy noble locks his eyes on the precious fortune left by the dead Portman patriarch. They push forward determined, fully convinced they need to grab that wealth to make up for all the supposed damages they suffered. With a rough shove, the patriarch yanks the gold handle and kicks the conference room door wide open. Stepping through the door, they run right into a sharply dressed Elric leaning on his cane, calmly waiting for his in-laws to show up. The young lord gives a respectful bow and formally introduces himself as Elric Portman, asking for genuine forgiveness for taking so incredibly long to come see them. Sitting at the table with his arms crossed, the patriarch sarcastically brings up the decade-long disappearing act, while his wife pretends to sympathize, hiding a fake smile behind her fan. Skipping the small talk, the young guy directly mentions he got the chance to read the message they sent to his house. His wife's dad acts like it's crazy the guy only read the letter just now, but pushes to speed up the chat, claiming he only sent it out of pure fatherly worry over the girl being abandoned. He points a finger at Elric, calling him shameless for leaving Tyria alone after the Wiben house helped the Portmans level up to nobility, greedily bringing up the massive cash inherited from the dead patriarch. The Baron lets out a mocking laugh and publicly insults his son-in-law's humble roots, making fun of the fact he came back with a limp and doubting his ability and legal right to manage any wealth. He clears his throat and arrogantly states that, since the money was solely controlled by Tyria, the kid obviously doesn't have what it takes to handle business. On the other side of the table, the noble couple puts their cards on the table, demanding the entire Portman fortune be handed over as a financial payout for ditching the girl. The Wiben boss insists his son-in-law is a scumbag for wanting to claim the cash and doubts he'd do anything useful with the coins he got from the patriarch. Hiding her greedy laugh behind her accessory, the Baron's wife backs up her partner and adds that the kid doesn't have the skills to run the estate, faking pity for her daughter's pain. Rocking dark, evil faces, the noble pair concludes the best move is for them to take absolute control of the money, promising they'll put every inherited cent to excellent use. Faced with all these ridiculous demands, Elric just lets out a deep, heavy sigh. He feels his eyes burn with rage and thinks about how disgusting this whole scene is, realizing that behind all the BS, the couple's only real goal is to steal the coins his dad left behind now that Tyria is alone. The guy deduces they saw the perfect opening to profit off someone else's wealth, not giving a single crap about their own daughter's health and peace, while trying to rob the estate just to line their pockets with gold. Overcome with extreme disgust, the young lord realizes he can't stomach hearing even one more word from such gross people. Elric narrows his eyes, takes a deep breath, and coldly warns them that before moving on to anything else, he wants to clear something up. He stares at them intently and apologizes for not bringing his wife to the meeting, seriously explaining she's super busy managing the farm's duties right now. Baron Joseph Wiben completely loses his patience, slams his fist on the table, and yells for his son-in-law to stop trying to dodge the topic, demanding total focus on the money split. The guy furiously screams for the kid to stop being greedy and just hand the cash over to them, asking if he seriously thinks it's okay to demand those assets after spending 10 long years away from his home. Dealing with his father-in-law's constant yelling accusing him of greed, Elric covers his face and lets out a sarcastic laugh, repeating the word greedy with absolute disgust. He slowly moves his fingers, locking his intense red eyes on the guy, and asks in a dangerously low tone what exactly Joseph plans to do if he decides to roll with this so-called greed. The Baron clears his throat and stutters in fear, while his son-in-law terrifyingly repeats the question of what they'd do if he decided to pocket all that wealth for himself. The guy taunts his father-in-law to speak up and show how he'd react, making fun of how the guy suddenly went mute after yelling so arrogantly. Not giving him room to reply, Elric slaps the table hard and harshly asks if the aristocrat's arrogant mouth dried up that fast when faced with a real fight. The patriarch shakes and screams in a rage, cursing the young guy out for being an insolent brat. The young lord stares at him coldly and notes that, apparently, his wife's dad finally realizes who he's actually messing with. The MC thinks back to his decade of pure survival on the battlefields, reminding himself there's no need to be flashy or show dumb anger against weak opponents. He figures that at the end of the day, nothing will change the outcome of this situation, no matter what meaning he tries to put behind his actions. Elric looks his father-in-law dead in the eyes and advises the man to keep his mouth completely shut from now on, warning that it's the best option if they still want to keep getting financial support from Tyria. He flashes a mocking smile and calls out how ridiculous he finds this whole comedy act put on by two people who have absolutely zero legal claim to his wife's money. The guy stands up using his cane for support and turns his back on them, imposing lie declaring that the only ones actually consumed by greed in this room are his in-laws. Joseph screams uncontrollably at his back, promising to raid the Portman farm to take the guy out, but Elric just responds with pure disrespect, telling the man to feel free to try whatever he wants. Before walking through the giant doors, our MC throws a terrifying look over his shoulder and warns them he'll be eagerly waiting for them to make a move. A little later, the young lord's ride starts its journey back, tearing down the tree-lined dirt roads under the afternoon light. Inside the carriage, Elric rests his head on his hand and lets out a deep, tired sigh while trying to chill out after the heavy argument. He starts asking himself if his arrogant attitude was actually any different from his relative's greed, bitterly concluding that, in Tyria's eyes, he's probably just another selfish sinner. The guy remembers the harsh words he spat at the Wibbin estate and starts doubting if he really did it to protect his wife from her family's terrible bloodline. Gripping the wooden handle of his cane, he wonders if he just acted like that to stroke his own twisted ego. The young man silently admits that the emotion taking over him in that room wasn't pity for Tyria, but a weird, sick pleasure in completely destroying and humiliating her family. In that moment, he remembers his late dad Hovan Portman's booming voice, ruthlessly demanding he earn the life he was given. Overwhelmed by a mix of stress and guilt, Elric realizes with horror that he's no different from his dead dad, just another self-centered dude who only cares about his own interests. Suddenly, the driver jumps at a weird noise coming from inside the carriage and hits the brakes instantly. Elric pushes the carriage door open fast and leans heavily against the wooden side. The guy leans out and violently throws up on the ground, choking on a sudden wave of distress and self-disgust. Breathing fast with sweat dripping down his pale face, he tries to catch his breath while whispering that he really is a pathetic, unfixable mess. The young lord stays there, leaning on the parked carriage on the side of the road, cutting through the giant golden wheat field in the evening vibe. Out of nowhere, the soft sound of footsteps crunching the dry plants breaks the silence, making him turn toward the noise. Still sweating cold from feeling sick, the guy looks around trying to figure out who's coming. His red eyes go wide in total shock as they lock onto a very familiar silhouette in the middle of the crops. He sees Tyria standing tall in the center of the massive wheat fields, wearing her rustic farm clothes under the soft sunset light. The gentle evening breeze blows the girl's blonde hair as she stares off into the distance with her usual calmness. Our MC whispers his wife's name with a cracking voice, deeply shaken to find her in such an isolated spot. Ignoring his own body pain and his cane, he starts walking fast toward the girl, mentally asking himself about everything she's been through. He struggles through the crops, hit with massive guilt as he thinks about how much the young girl had to suffer in silence trapped by her incredibly selfish parents. The guy feels like he can't breathe, realizing his dead dad was also one of the people to blame for dumping that horrible weight onto such a young girl's shoulders. Aldio and young Marie watch the scene from far away looking confused, while Elric keeps desperately rushing through the field, blaming himself for also being a reason for her pain. He figures that everyone who was part of this poor girl's life, including himself, somehow hurt or used her over the years. The guy finally reaches his wife and grabs her arm firmly, abruptly stopping her in her tracks. Startled by his sudden move and his heavy breathing, Tyria turns around and asks, confused, what's going on with him. With zero energy to stay standing and overwhelmed by huge guilt, Elric bows down in front of his wife in the middle of the wheat field, grabbing her hand while begging for forgiveness for every little thing. Elric begs for his wife's forgiveness, apologizing for leaving her totally isolated for 10 dragged-out years, and for trying to make excuses for his selfish moves like he did it to protect her. Holding Tyria's hands in the middle of the field, he takes the blame for every struggle, pain, and problem she was forced to face with zero support. The young lady listens in total silence, her eyes wide with pure shock as she watches the arrogant heir admit that the whole mess was his massive failure. This super vulnerable vibe brings back memories from a long time ago when they were kids, the day a young Elric grabbed a wooden log to protect little Tyria from a pack of monsters. After scaring the creatures off, the little heir turned to the blonde girl and asked if she was okay or if she got bitten anywhere. The little girl shyly replied she wasn't hurt, but worriedly pointed at the boy's leg, which had a bleeding wound. Seeing the cut, little Elric jumped in terror and started furiously yelling at the stupid bugs for having the nerve to slice his leg. Super shy, the girl quietly asked him to come closer so she could check out the cut. While carefully bandaging his wound, she listened to the young guy proudly brag that his name was Elric Portman and that he only helped because it happened on his family's land, refusing any kind of thank you. Noticing how quiet the girl was while she treated him, Elric asked if she was always this silent and suggested she try sucking up to him, bragging that he'd become a famous royal fighter one day. Young Tyria didn't say a single word and just kept doing her thing with her cheeks super red from shyness. When she finished the solid bandage job, she embarrassedly said she was done, making the boy awkwardly mumble a thank you while looking away. Amazed by the little girl's skills, he said she seemed like a high-class lady but asked, totally curious, where she learned to treat wounds like a pro. She whispered super quietly that her nanny used to treat her cuts like that, making the boy complain he couldn't hear and demand she speak louder. Feeling pressured by his rushed tone, the young girl just dropped her shoulders and got even redder and more embarrassed. Elric complained it would be super hard for her to survive in the real world being so shy, teasingly warning she'd never be able to get married if she kept acting like that. Right after, he blushed a little and whispered that, if he became a kingdom fighter, he might consider making her his future wife. Hearing this totally unexpected promise, young Tyria's golden eyes went wide, and she felt her heart beat fast with strong feelings for the first time. Freaking out over her silence, the boy started yelling, red with embarrassment, demanding she not get a big head just because she was pretty, making up that he only wanted her around for her medical skills. He stomped off, yelling that she'd be begging to marry him the second he became a knight, annoyed that the little girl left him hanging until the very end. Watching him walk away in that loud, arrogant way, the young lady just gave a warm, subtle little smirk. Snapping back to the present, inside the privacy of her room, the picture of that focused, super confident kid Elric is still kept in a fancy frame. Tyria fondly holds her husband's childhood photo, feeling nostalgic about the promise the boy made so many years ago. She smiles sweetly, realizing that, even though he never became a royal knight, life somehow found a way to bring them back together under the same roof. As the sunset paints the sky over the Portman farm, head maid Rhonda tells Marie to prep the tea service for the highly anticipated meeting between the bosses of the house. The head maid leads Tyria back to the mansion's rooms with confident, classy steps through the grand hallways. On the way, Rhonda nervously mentions that the young master's vibe seemed super heavy and sad today. His young wife walks full of anxiety with her hands clasped, mentally wondering what the real reason behind her husband's summon was. When they reach the office door, the maid knocks lightly on the wood and formally announces that the young lord's wife is here. Sitting across from each other in the fancy meeting room, the two are wrapped in a heavy silence, with Elric keeping his head down looking deep in thought. To break the tense vibe in the room, Tyria takes the lead and shyly says she'd like to share something important with him. But the young guy politely cuts her off, explaining that he called her there specifically to tell her something really important. Locking his expressive red eyes on her with total seriousness, our MC drops a genuine, heavy apology. Tyria covers her mouth and lets out a tiny gasp of pure shock, completely stunned by her partner's unexpected attitude. Elric keeps it 100 real and apologizes for abandoning her right on their wedding day, forcing her to carry the entire weight of the mansion by herself. He admits he acted incredibly stupid and reckless back then, totally failing to predict the massive fallout his impulsive moves would cause in her life. The young guy takes the blame for all the mental scars and huge problems she had to tank in total isolation, doubling down on his desire to fix his past screw-ups. Looking hopeful and sincere, the heir asks if she could accept his honest apologies. Tyria looks at him sweetly and says he has absolutely no obligation to make up for those past choices. She calmly admits she never held any grudge against him and that staying at the Portman estate was entirely her call, insisting he shouldn't blame himself for anything. But seeing the non-stop guilt on the young guy's face, the girl realizes his heart will never find peace if she just rejects his plea. Flashing a beautiful, warm blush, she lovingly announces that she gladly accepts her husband's apology. Faced with the girl's kindness, Elric's stiff face finally relaxes, making way for a smile of pure relief and gratitude. He thanks her from the bottom of his soul for understanding and sweetly calls her "Milady." A little later, they start walking side by side down the hall, with the young guy leaning on his wooden cane for support. Looking worried, Tyria asks if his injured leg is feeling any better, and he replies he's doing great, trying to change the subject instantly. Elric awkwardly apologizes for wasting her precious time knowing how packed her schedule is, but she sweetly asks him not to stress over it. After hesitating for a sec, the young woman calls out to him shyly, grabbing her husband's attention and pushing him to tell her what's on her mind. Completely red from embarrassment, Tyria asks with her head down if, instead of calling her "Milady" so formally. With her face burning and her heart racing, the young lady super shyly mumbles if he could start calling her "my wife." Elric gets confused by his wife's super quiet mumble and awkwardly asks what she just said. Before Tyria can reply, the hall door is violently thrown open by the clumsy Marie, who screams that the tea is finally ready. But with the maid's jump scare entrance, the young guy totally loses his balance, yells in panic, and drops his cane on the floor. Unable to catch himself, the young lord falls forward and lands right on top of Tyria, leaving them in a super awkward and intimate position on the chair. Aldio shows up right after with a super shady smile and jokes that the couple seemed pretty busy planning the next heir for the Portman bloodline. Bright red from embarrassment and panic, Elric scrambles up while trying to explain to the butler that the whole thing was just a terrifying accident. Marie goes into shock and starts screaming, begging for genuine forgiveness for the mix-up, while Aldio covers the new maid's eyes and sarcastically suggests the staff pretend they didn't just walk in on the boss's private time. The old butler throws up a thumbs up and swears he'll tell all the other workers to never interrupt the couple when they're alone, totally ignoring Elric's frantic protests. With his face burning, the guy desperately tries to do damage control for the embarrassing scene in front of his wife. Tyria is still lying on the furniture, blushing hard and breathing heavy, quietly asking him to just get off her for a second. Before shutting the door and leaving them alone again, Aldio gives a bro wink in hopes they enjoy their alone time, earning another scream of pure rage from Elric. The conference room door finally shuts with a solid thud, leaving only the sound of the young lord's complaints echoing from inside. During that starry night, Elric's screams complaining about the butler's teasing keep echoing through the lit-up windows of the epic Portman mansion. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight start shining into the young guy's fancy bedroom while birds happily chirp outside. Head maid Rhonda quietly steps into the young lord's room and politely asks if he just coughed. Elric, already awake and wearing just a light shirt, gives his dedicated childhood maid a friendly good morning. Rhonda notices the young guy is in a great mood and way more hyped than usual, asking with a friendly smile if something awesome happened last night. She sneaks closer and whispers in his ear with ulterior motives, asking if by any chance they can already expect news about a future heir to the bloodline. The young lord instantly turns red and waves his hands frantically, insisting Rhonda shouldn't listen to the ridiculous rumors the pervy old butler makes up. Rhonda turns around with a sneaky little smirk, but instantly gets serious as she warns that last night's events shouldn't be brushed off as just a quick stumble. Seeing the guy's confused face, the maid turns back with a strict look and asks if he seriously doesn't get the weight of his actions. She corners him like a boss and reminds him he spent 10 long years away from home, pointing out that the burden of that abandonment is way harder on a young woman and demanding he never leave Tyria lonely again. Meanwhile, in her sunlit room, the young boss rests peacefully in her fancy double bed after a solid night's sleep. Tyria wakes up with a sweet smile, feeling like this bright morning is way softer, happier, and more amazing than any morning before. She holds her husband's childhood picture to her heart and lovingly wishes him a great morning. The girl puts the frame back on the nightstand, feeling her heart warm up with the certainty that the wall between her and Elric finally started breaking down after yesterday's honest talk. Stretching happily in the morning light, she thinks about the lovely idea of starting to greet her husband face to face every morning from now on. The sun shines bright over the massive, fertile golden wheat fields surrounding the huge Portman farm. Inside the mansion's banquet hall, the young couple sits down to enjoy breakfast, chilling at opposite ends of the massive wooden table. With chill movements, the food-fried eggs, crispy bacon, and golden toast starts getting served and sliced smoothly. Tyria enjoys her breakfast elegantly and calmly, keeping perfect, classy posture. On the flip side, Elric tries to eat in silence while a drop of cold sweat rolls down his forehead, feeling super tense and embarrassed over last night's intimate slip-up. He can't focus on his food because his brain refuses to stop replaying the vivid image of his blushing wife trapped under him on the office furniture. Noticing the young guy is clearly stressed, Tyria calls him sweetly, making him jump in his chair and answer in a total flustered panic. With her cheeks a little red, the girl shyly asks if, assuming he has some free time today, he'd want to go for a walk around the farm with her. The young guy looks up from his food and repeats the word walk with a face of obvious shock. Panicking internally that he might get the wrong idea, Tyria quickly explains that the inspection is needed because the harvest festival is coming up, and having the head of the house there would be huge for the staff. Getting how important the party is for the family estate, Elric cracks a warm smile and relaxes his posture at the table. He gives her a soft look and accepts the invite instantly, promising it'll be an honor to walk with her during the crop inspection. Tyria's heart fills with joy at the yes, and she nods, flashing a beautiful, shy smile. Hours later in the mansion's dressing rooms, Rhonda asks if the outfit's corset is too tight, and the lady calmly replies that it's perfect. Under the head maid's strict eye, the maids help Tyria fix up her fancy, luxurious dark blue dress in front of the giant mirror. Happy with how the boss's look turned out, Rhonda tells Marie to keep helping the young woman while she leaves the room to check if the Lord is done getting ready too. Opening the hall door, the maid bumps into the young guy already dressed and happily celebrates that he isn't late for the event. However, Rhonda's face instantly morphs into a look of pure disgust and shock when she checks out the guy's outfit. Elric shows up wearing a bizarre, giant pirate hat and leather gear that makes him look like a highway bandit, asking with an awkward smile if there wasn't anything more practical and agile for a walk in the fields. Furious at the guy's zero fashion sense, Rhonda grabs his forearm hard and drags him back down the hall, yelling that he's going to inspect family property, not jumping into a war zone dressed like a criminal. She violently yanks open Elric's private wardrobe doors, dead set on destroying that fashion disaster for good. The young lord tries to complain while getting dragged into the room, stubbornly, but uselessly arguing that he's a grown man and totally capable of picking his own clothes. Ignoring the heir's panic pleas, Rhonda shoves him back into a chair and strictly orders him to sit tight while she hunts down an outfit fit for a real lord. Rhonda puts on her white gloves looking intimidating as heck and states that an aristocrat must always show up with the class his rank demands, warning that she's doing a total makeover on him right this second. Tuning out the young guy's frantic begging, the maid starts ripping off the leather pieces and the pirate hat with fast, precise moves, tossing those boring colors aside. With his shirt half unbuttoned, Elric lets out a nervous laugh and begs Rhonda to stop, insisting he can dress himself as long as she just picks the clothes and leaves the room already. The maid lets out an amused laugh and teases him, asking if the young lord is seriously feeling shy around her right now, reminding him he used to run around the house naked when he was just a little kid. Having zero patience for useless chatter, the dedicated head maid marches relentlessly toward the heir and demands he hurry up. With one hard yank, she pulls his shirt completely off, making the guy stumble backward and let out a startled yell. But the joke ends instantly when Rhonda covers her mouth, completely horrified and frozen by what she just saw. Right in front of her eyes, the guy's chest and stomach are covered in deep, terrifying battle scars stacked up from a full decade of war. Shaking and with tears filling her eyes, the head maid asks with a crying voice what the heck happened to his body during all those years he was gone. Wearing a serious and slightly embarrassed face, Elric slowly starts buttoning his shirt back up, mentioning that this is exactly why he insisted on getting dressed by himself. Rhonda steps closer with her heart shattered, tearfully begging him to tell her about the awful things he had to face in the war zones. The guy gently puts his hand on the crying maid's face and lovingly promises he'll explain the whole truth as soon as the time is right. Flashing a polite and somewhat fragile smile, the young lord earnestly asks her to keep quiet about the scars and absolutely not say a word to Tyria. Feeling the weight of the guy's silent pain, Rhonda bites her lip and squeezes his hand tight, trying to hold back her own sobs. Switching back into her strict head maid mode, she wipes her face and swears that from now on she's the only one allowed to help him get dressed, earning a genuine thank you from the young lord. A while later, Elric marches with classy steps toward the carriage where old driver Aldio is calmly waiting. The young guy shows up looking flawless in a fancy dark blue party suit, and a satin cravat tied perfectly around his neck. Checking him out through his monocle, Aldio relievedly admits he was scared the young guy would show up dressed like an outlaw and make the boss lady pass out from embarrassment, figuring his worries were for nothing. The young lord laughs and good-naturedly reveals that actually almost happened, but luckily Rhonda stepped in just in time to save him from a fashion disaster. While they're chatting, Aldio gives a respectful bow as he notices Tyria arriving, walking gorgeously toward the carriage. Flanked by her maids, the young woman looks stunning in her blue dress, shyly admitting she tried harder than usual on her look since it's their first official outing together. Elric stares at her completely mesmerized by how beautiful she is, and with his face burning red, he can only stutter out that she looks absolutely breathtaking. Tyria says thanks with a sweet, embarrassed blush, while Rhonda watches the whole thing from a distance and decides to keep the scar secret, seeing that her boss is genuinely happy with her husband. The heir offers his arm like a true gentleman and helps his wife step into the carriage under the beautiful blue sky kicking off their trip. A few moments later, the vehicle hits the busy market of the Portman estate, where the locals' chatter starts echoing with surprise. The news of the young master's return spreads like wildfire through the market town, creating a wave of whispers and gossip about the unexpected comeback of the Portman heir. Elric walks arm in arm with his wife, friendly waving back at people and hoping everyone is doing well and having a good harvest. In the warehouse area, nice Aunt Michelle spots the guy right away and cheers excitedly, hugging the messy old kid who grew up into such a buff, majestic dude. Near the village taverns, the older locals also walk up happy and shocked, having a hard time believing the kid actually made it back home. One guy notices the guy's wooden cane and asks what happened to his leg. Elric awkwardly scratches his head and claims it was just a minor battle injury, while the farmers complain that the next boss had to go through such brutality. Suddenly, an excited yell calling for Boss Elric makes our MC turn around feeling curious. It's Bart, the guy's ultimate childhood best friend, running toward the crowd rocking a massive, warm grin from ear to ear. The two buddies greet each other with a super strong handshake packed with nostalgia. Between laughs and jokes, Elric celebrates that his friend hasn't changed a bit, while Bart jokes that the boss looks so different and fancy he almost didn't recognize him. The blonde guy politely greets Tyria, and the young boss returns the favor, genuinely wishing her husband's childhood friend great health. Hyped up as always, Bart points at his shop and invites the duo to swing by his tavern later so they can grab drinks and properly celebrate the reunion. Patting his chest with hype, the Portman heir promises he'll definitely drop by to see his buddy so they can catch up. The couple says goodbye to Bart with friendly waves and continues their nice stroll through the busy market under the evening light. Watching the two walk away arm in arm, the young tavern owner cracks a satisfied smile, realizing that despite all his old doubts, they actually make a surprisingly balanced pair. At the end of that productive day, the carriage starts heading back to the mansion, while the sun dips below the horizon of the massive wheat fields. Inside the ride, Tyria stays focused on reading a book, while Elric stares at her intensely and quietly. The guy sneaks a peek at the pages, and is amazed to see his wife is busy studying a complex plant encyclopedia. Using a soft, loving voice, our MC breaks the quiet room and gently calls his wife. Tyria looks up from the book with her cheeks a bit red, instantly answering her husband's call. Rocking an inviting smile, Elric shares that he wants to start actively helping her run the territory, politely asking her to teach him everything about the farm's duties. Embarrassed, he scratches the back of his neck and admits she tanked that massive workload totally alone for way too long, declaring he really wants to step up and do his job as a real leader of the house, even if he's super late to the party. The young guy promises that if she guides and teaches him the ropes patiently, he'll become a huge asset to the family business, making the young girl so flustered she hides her red face behind the book. Peeking over the pages with a sweet touch smile, Tyria sheds happy tears realizing her husband finally turned into the mature, reliable guy she always dreamed about. With fresh confidence, the young boss shuts the plant study book with a solid thud on her lap. She looks her husband in the eye with her glowing gold irises and, showing a look full of confidence and softness, asks if he's ready to handle the fact she'll be an incredibly strict teacher, just like the late patriarch trained her. Elric lets out a soft, low laugh and agrees to let her be tough on him during his training. As the carriage rolls on under the beautiful sunset, the guy asks if his dead dad really trained her that strictly. Tyria proudly smiles and says yes, though she never got yelled at because she was a model student who caught on super fast. The story then cuts to a busy tavern near the Cheber border, under the bright light of a full moon. Inside the bar, dozens of regulars are spending the early morning throwing back drinks, chatting and chilling in a super loud setting. Suddenly, someone wearing black boots and red tights steps into the room, stomping hard on the wooden floor and screaming for all the idiots in there to shut up and listen to her. The bartender instantly stops washing his glasses and stares at the door with a look of pure shock and confusion. Stepping into the firelight, a red-haired girl in a dark cloak stops at the entrance and coldly warns that she's only going to ask this once. Giving off a freezing, terrifying glare, she harshly demands they tell her where to find Kasha, the dreaded sword demon. The next morning, at the epic Portman farm, the early sunbeams light up the fancy mansion under a golden sky. In the office, the scratchy sound of a quill on paper echoes through the room as a hand quickly signs a bunch of documents. Seeing his wife buried in so much work, Elric asks if she usually handles all this paperwork by herself, and Tyria calmly replies this only really happens during the craziest harvest seasons. Tyria then shyly looks up from her writing and calls him Lord, making the young guy politely ask her to just say what's on her mind. With red cheeks, the young lady asks if he'd be down to give a speech to the locals during the harvest festival to publicly celebrate his return to the estate. The suggestion makes the Portman heir super nervous and breaks him into a cold sweat, forcing him to fake a smirk while stressing over having to give a speech to such a massive crowd. In that moment, he remembers his combat days, when the fighters of Parvin screamed oaths of loyalty and demanded with pure hate that they wipe out all their enemies on the battlefield. Our MC remembers that back when he was the ruthless mercenary Kasha, he was purely fueled by hate and didn't give a crap about motivational speeches while chilling quietly. He never stood on stages dropping poetic words and had zero desire to act like an inspiring leader for anyone else. Elric is fully aware that the real reason he walked through those war-torn places had nothing to do with honorable goals. At the end of the day, he only charged into battle because he desperately needed a target to unleash his pointless rage. Blinded by that grudge, the young guy mercilessly cut down any enemy warrior who crossed his path under a blood-red sky. Like a rabid, out-of-control dog, his only goal was to destroy anyone who had the guts to stand in his way. Remembering his old, twisted, battle-scarred self, Elric asks himself if someone that messed up even has the right to speak to the crowd, until Tyria's sweet voice snaps him back to reality. Coming back from his dark flashbacks, the guy nods clumsily and quickly apologizes to his wife for zoning out. He then flashes an encouraging smile and suggests Tyria herself give the festival's main speech, while he stands right by her side to show his public support. The young woman happily accepts the offer and agrees to take on the job of speaking to the locals this harvest. She smiles sweetly, thinking that just having her beloved husband next to her during the ceremony is more than enough to make her happy. Later on, standing in front of a massive crowd packed into the center of the village, Tyria kicks off the harvest festival by giving huge thanks to all the residents for their hard work all year. Flashing a bright smile, the young lady wraps up her speech by officially declaring the party open and telling everyone to party hard at the festival. The farm workers cheer the start of the party with loud, hyped-up yells and clap to celebrate the event kicking off. Holding Elric's hands, Tyria looks at him lovingly and asks if they should go check out the festival booths together. As soon as the couple starts walking through the busy square, the locals stare at them in total awe and happily gossip about their bosses showing up to the party. A friendly local walks up and politely hands the young boss a traditional dish to taste. Right after, another farm worker hands over a giant mug of frothy booze and invites the young lord to drink and celebrate with them. With their hands full of treats, the two smile happily and say a huge thank you for the warm welcome, wishing everyone there an awesome festival. While they're walking, Tyria's eyes suddenly go wide with shock when she spots something super weird happening in the middle of the event. She grabs her husband's arm tight with blushing cheeks and excitedly points for him to check out the attraction up ahead. On the main stage, a guy in a costume is showing off his skills for the Wibbin locals, announcing the start of a rare show brought straight from the royal palace. The announcer yells to the crowd that the next dangerous act is all about swallowing razor-sharp swords. The performer swallows the sharp metal right down his throat, leaving the young wife completely mind-blown by the crazy stunt, while her husband watches with an awkward fake smile. When the epic performance wraps up, Tyria claps enthusiastically along with the crowd in the square. But when she looks at her husband, she notices Elric is standing there with a totally blank face, looking 0% impressed by the show. When asked if he didn't think the act was amazing, the guy scratches the back of his neck and dodges the question, saying he's seen plenty of people putting swords in their mouths before, hiding the fact that in the war, he was the one forcing real swords down his enemies' throats. Continuing their nice walk arm in arm, the couple walks past a big wooden sign advertising a knife-throwing game. The booth owner recognizes our MC and yells for him to come throw a few, making the kids around the booth super hyped to see the Lord play. The vendor points at 3 fruits hanging on the wooden board and promises a great prize if he can hit the targets. Elric cracks an awkward smile and mentions it's been a long time since he held a knife, but the kids beg him to show off his fighting skills. Flashing a sweet smile, Tyria grabs her husband's hand and encourages him to play the game with the kids. Giving in to his wife's cute begging, the Portman heir grabs the blades and walks up to the throwing line while the kids scream with hype. The vendor running the game jokingly tells the Lord not to get too nervous, having zero clue that the guy's red eyes just sharpened with the cold focus of a real killer. With fast moves in perfect form, Elric throws the knives with pinpoint accuracy and easily nails the dead center of every fruit. The vendor and the kids are totally jaw-dropped and let out a scream of shock at his perfect score. Tyria watches the whole thing with red cheeks, unable to believe her husband's flawless aim. Seeing everyone's shocked faces, Elric starts sweating cold, wondering if he should have acted a bit clumsier to avoid looking suspicious. He decides to hide his crazy skills, blaming his win on pure luck and humbly telling his wife he just hoped he wouldn't mess up too bad. Tyria, bouncing with excitement, claps for her husband and excitedly says his knife-throwing aim was worthy of a top-tier knight. Noticing his wife is glowing with party spirit, he gives a subtle smile, genuinely happy to see her like that. The contest guy walks up carrying a straw basket and hands the young master his well-earned prize. With a huge grin, he explains the Merchant Guild's prize is a basket full of high-quality fresh eggs. Acting super chill, Elric politely turns down the gift and suggests giving the basket to the village kids, who go wild over the young lord's generous move. Tyria looks at him with pure affection and says, totally amazed, how incredibly kind he is. Obviously embarrassed, Elric confesses he was just remembering his childhood, back when he used to win similar baskets and would get super hyped finding a golden egg mixed in. Tyria lets out a loud laugh and reminds him that back then, he used the valuable golden egg to buy an old knight's metal helmet, even though the thing was so huge it looked like a bucket on his head. The young master is completely shocked, his eyes wide as he asks, totally bewildered, how she could possibly know such a personal story from when he was little. Nervous, Tyria stutters and tries to make up an excuse on the fly, clumsily claiming he was famous for being a troublemaker, and that stories about his pranks were popular around town. But she bites her bottom lip, thinking to herself she could never tell him the real reason she knew all that. The truth is, even as a kid, she used to watch him while hiding behind trees, secretly wishing since back then that she'd become the troublemaker's bride. Snapping back to the present, the guy calls her softly to get her attention again. With a gentle smile, offering his hand like a true gentleman, Elric mentions the after-party is starting soon and asks if they should head to the main square. Feeling her heart melt, Tyria takes her husband's hand and accepts the invite with a beautiful smile. Under a starry sky, the MC of the event holds a torch up to the crowd, announcing the lighting ritual that officially kicks off the party. Before lighting the giant bonfire, he makes sure to thank the Portmans for showing up, dropping hyped-up compliments about how beautiful the young lady looks. The crowd laughs and keeps it chill, while Elric jokes that the host is a pretty charismatic dude. The speaker dramatically waves at the crowd, telling everyone to say a prayer for the region's success and lasting legacy. Out of nowhere, he yells that the party needs to start with a passionate kiss between Lord Elric and Lady Tyria. Blindsided by the bold request, they both jump, looking at each other super embarrassed and having no clue what to do. Tyria feels her face burn, realizing she has to kiss her husband in front of the entire community. Meanwhile, the host stays on the main stage, holding the torch up for the crowd. The host hypes up the tradition, loudly insisting on how important the gesture is to bless the region. With big gestures, he officially calls the 2 leaders to step up and do the highly anticipated kiss ritual. With blushing faces and racing hearts, the 2 share super shy looks. From the middle of the crowd, Bart lets out a teasing laugh and yells for his childhood buddy to make a move, making Elric mentally curse the tavern owner for being annoying. Always the joker, the young tavern owner gets the crowd to start chanting to hype the guy up. In seconds, the crowd starts clapping and yelling in unison, pressuring the couple to lock lips. Realizing there's no escaping it, Elric leans slightly toward his wife and politely asks for permission. With a quick, confident move, he grabs her waist, dipping her back gently like a classic movie scene. He leans in close to her lips, leaving the young lady with wide eyes and a racing heart from how close they are. With blushing cheeks, the guy pulls back a little and whispers an apology, explaining he only did it to keep the crowd happy. Tyria closes her eyes with a sweet smile and replies she totally gets needing to follow the festival tradition. But then she suddenly pulls him in by the neck, super determined, and plants a deep, passionate kiss on his lips, proving she wasn't just doing it for the crowd. Seeing that, the crowd goes wild with cheers and clapping while the giant bonfire is finally lit. Under the moonlight, the locals party hard, wishing the couple a long life of love and glory for their lands. Hours later, the Portman mansion is dead quiet under the starry night sky. In her room, Tyria is kneeling on her bed, burying her face in a pillow to muffle her screams of embarrassment. She's breathing heavy, her cheeks bright red from the emotional roller coaster. Her brain replays the kiss in slow motion, and she desperately asks herself why she made such a bold move on her husband. Stressed that she might seem weird or way too forward, the young lady tosses and turns, unable to sleep. Down the hall, Elric is also wide awake, touching his own lips while his heart beats like crazy. Meanwhile, far away, a noble family's mansion stands out under the sun in the kingdom of Armin. Inside the luxurious palace, a hand smoothly holds a porcelain teacup decorated with gold. A blonde guy with round glasses takes a chill sip of his drink, starting his day completely unbothered. His secretary, Agnes Blackmare, walks up to the desk and tells Edward White that the Imperial troops broke through the borders of Falbin and Cheber. Hearing the report, the blonde guy puts his cup down and casually mentions that, once Kasha left, those regions falling was basically guaranteed. Known as the Golden Duke, Edward White smirks, thinking it was an absolute genius play to make the mercenary Kasha the centerpiece of his schemes. By his side, Secretary Agnes Blackmare keeps a cold, professional vibe, listening to her boss without showing any emotion. Still, the girl seriously asks if it's smart to just let those regions fall, since they're heavily invested financially with the EW group. Edward takes another sip of tea and explains that the Emperor's War has been dragging on for 7 years, pointing out those places only kept the military going because of investments from his company. He finishes his cup and adds that those lands literally have zero way to pay back the massive debts they owe Armin. With a sneaky look, the Duke promises that those regions losing is just a matter of time now that the mercenary is gone, stressing they need to grab their shares back before the final blowout. Getting the plan, Agnes reaches out to pour more tea from the gold teapot. As she elegantly pours Edward's cup, she casually notes that her boss is ruthless when it comes to business. The blonde guy instantly drops the serious act and complains dramatically, swearing he's just doing his civic duty as an honorable Armin noble. Getting serious again, the secretary asks if it's really safe to leave the legendary Kasha running around unchecked. The Golden Duke smirks, correcting her that the terrifying sword demon doesn't exist anymore and is now just a regular dude named Elric Portman. Agnes suggests they should have taken the warrior out early on to avoid any risks, but Edward replies, sweating cold, that a direct attack would have been a fatal mistake if they failed. The blonde guy reminds her she saw Kasha's insane power herself, how he deflected a supersonic bullet with a magic shield even after his knees were completely wrecked. He rests his elbows on the desk and explains it'd be a total waste to kill someone with that much potential, claiming this current setup is way more profitable. Edward mentions the warrior he met had a mercenary's soul, sharing his ambition, even though they have super different personalities. The Duke gestures calmly and reveals that unlike dudes who only fight for gold, Elric never fought for his own personal gain. With an intimidating look, he admits he decided to play the guy like a puppet because he knew exactly how he ticked. He points out that without the sword demon on the front lines, the battles will hit a dead end, forcing nations to beg for financial bailouts from the EW Corporation. Agnes listens closely and puts the pieces together, realizing that in this scenario, the retired warrior is the perfect wildcard to tip the scales in Edward's favor and boost the company's wealth. Hearing his assistant's logic, the Golden Duke gets visibly hyped, his eyes shining at how sharp she is. He jumps up with a huge grin and points at the girl, loudly cheering about having such a genius assistant. Super hyped, he walks toward Agnes with open arms, insisting on giving her a thank you hug. But his approach is shut down by a solid punch that makes him spit in pain. With a stone-cold face and clenched fist, the secretary completely ignores him, seriously warning him not to try anything funny, promising she won't go easy on him just because he's older. Back in Wibben, the day starts sunny with just a few clouds over the Portman mansion. In his room, Elric looks in the mirror while head maid Rhonda helps him fix his outdoor coat. The young master walks down the main hall with Rhonda and spots his wife walking toward him. Bumping into her husband bright and early, the young lady instantly blushes and says a shy hello. Elric, also super nervous, turns around with a red face and answers awkwardly. Noticing the cute, awkward vibe between the couple after last night, Rhonda laughs and steps in to stir up some fun conversation. Panicking from embarrassment, the young lady does a 180 and sprints down the hall as fast as she can. The guy awkwardly scratches his neck, watching his wife run away while the head maid watches him closely. Curious, Rhonda asks if they fought, mentioning she heard some pretty spicy rumors about how they acted at the festival. Elric waves his hands like crazy, explaining it was just Bart pulling a prank, but the maid cheekily insists those rumors might be true. Visibly embarrassed with his face burning up, our MC changes the subject instantly, asking about the guests coming to the estate. Switching back to pro mode, the maid explains a trade delegation from the west is arriving soon. Hearing about the Western Kingdoms, Elric's face gets super serious, and he breaks a cold sweat remembering his military past. She happily adds that the area's top-tier wheat brings in delegations every year, mentioning even the Kingdom of Armen is joining the trade talks. Elric bites his hand, stressing out that some visitor might recognize him as a merc and bring unwanted drama to the peaceful barony. The maid notes that normally Tyria would handle the guests, but suggests it'd look better if the lord of the house stepped up, which he reluctantly agrees to. A bit later, the young master shows up at the train station with driver Aldio, who tells him to chill out and not stress over the meeting. The driver promises in a good mood that the basic formal greetings they practiced are all he needs, earning a genuine thanks from the guy. Our MC takes a deep breath, telling himself there's no way a survivor from his battles would come to such a chill place just to buy wheat. He pats his coat to check his hidden weapon, knowing in theory there'd be no reason to use it. Suddenly, the steam locomotive rolls down the tracks, blasting its whistle, signaling the foreigners are here. With screeching brakes, the first members of the delegation step onto the stone platform. Acting like a proper lord with his cane in hand, Elric steps up to give the official Portman family welcome. But looking at the newcomers, the guy jumps when he spots someone he definitely wasn't expecting. The guy in the green suit with a green mustache steps back, sweating cold in pure terror. Under Elric's sharp stare, bloody memories flood back in a horrifying way. Shaking and pale, the guy reaches out his hand and stutters, asking if he's the terrifying mercenary Kasha. The scene cuts quickly back to Edward White's place in Armen. The Golden Duke sprints frantically down the halls with Agnes, complaining that his sister didn't warn him she was visiting. He rushes to throw open the main hall doors to welcome the guest. With open arms and a huge grin, Edward says hi to his older sister. But she just glares at him with total indifference, throwing a sharp, impatient look. Revealed as the main shareholder and known as the Flaming Flower, Egret Valentina is waiting for him sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. Ignoring her grumpy face, the blonde guy picks her up affectionately and jokes about how much she's grown since they last met. With fury in her eyes, Valentina coldly demands he put her down right now, unless he wants to be burned alive on the spot. Shaking with fear, the Golden Duke drops her on the couch immediately. Skipping the small talk, the redhead demands to know if he found out where the mercenary Kasha is. Edward scratches his head awkwardly and stutters that the warrior vanished like a ghost, making it super hard to track him. Valentina screams, threatening to pull her shares from the company, sending the guy into a panic as he begs her not to. She violently pinches her brother's cheek and orders him to find Kasha's bastard self and drag him to her ASAP if he doesn't want to go bankrupt. She turns around dramatically, her dark cape swooshing behind her. Full of determination, she gets ready to leave. She walks out of the hall coldly, warning she won't give him much time, demanding he at least find a trail on the warrior, leaving Edward completely devastated. The hall doors slam shut with a loud bang. Still on his knees, Edward tells Agnes, terrified, that he'll never tell his sister Kasha's real location, knowing a meeting between those two would cause a continental disaster. Switching gears, he stands up and asks if the Armen crew has already been sent to Wibben. Agnes confirms, but admits she has her doubts, arguing a smart warrior like Kasha probably wouldn't fall for such an obvious trade trap. Edward smirks and fires back that, even if the merc says no, Elric Portman will have to say yes, because he cooked up a deal the barony literally can't refuse. The scene focuses on the train rolling through the Portman wheat fields. Inside the train car, the nervous Lord Polo rides in silence next to a purple-haired noble. Across from them, the old gray-haired diplomat watches them with a super serious look. He keeps a strict face while analyzing his underlings. The focus shifts back to the Wibben station platform under the hiss of steam. The diplomat in the dark suit steps off the train. Elric and Aldio give a classy bow to welcome the crew. The young master smiles, explaining he got carriages ready to take them to the mansion. But hearing Elric's voice, Lord Polo goes completely pale from terror and freezes on the spot. Under the guy's dark stare, awful memories hit the noble hard. The merchant reaches out a shaking hand and stammers in fear. In a panic, Lord Polo screams and backs up, while Elric goes cold, realizing he just ran into the exact guy from his past. Our MC swallows hard, knowing if his cover is blown, the barony is in danger, and decides he needs to hide his identity no matter what. While Polo begs to go back to his country, his buddies try to calm him down, which is when Elric steps in to introduce himself. Putting on a goofy, clueless smile, he introduces himself as Elric Portman, the current lord of the land. The foreign noble looks confused, wondering to himself if this clumsy kid could actually be the mercenary Kasha. Elric laughs nicely and asks if he's okay, making Polo breathe a sigh of relief, figuring an idiot like that couldn't possibly be the sword demon. He remembers that the killer he saw back in the day was a completely different kind of monster. Flashing back to 5 years ago, an arrogant noble slaps a humble worker at an imperial banquet. The scene causes a massive uproar and bad vibes among the aristocrats there. High society watches the drama, totally shocked by the attack. Sprawled on the marble, Lord Polo yells that a trash commoner shouldn't have dared to be so disrespectful. Faced with the noble's rage, a young Elric Portman shows up, dressed flawlessly, taking off his white gloves with a ruthless look on his face. Without hesitating, he slaps the noble with his own glove, declaring there's no need to debate. With total disrespect, he announces that this insult to his honor will be settled permanently with a duel. Polo accepts the challenge, ordering the guards to bring swords so he can teach the kids some manners. While they argue, Lord Elvis Graham yells from his wheelchair for them to stop immediately. Elric pauses and looks back with zero emotion. Elvis tries to defuse the bomb, apologizing for his buddy, but a furious Polo says it's too late. Polo keeps running his mouth, and Elvis strictly orders mercenary Kasha to apologize right away. Hearing the sword demon's name, Polo freezes in pure terror, remembering that Kasha is a super dangerous guy you do not want to mess with. He stares at the guy, swallowing hard as he realizes the monster he saw in the past was actually this beast. Snapping back to the present, Polo tries to play it cool, claiming he just overreacted for no reason and asking them to forget the whole thing, making Elric relieved as he suggests they move on. But walking behind the guy, the noble stews in anger, thinking that the memory of that mercenary still haunts him. He throws a super suspicious side-eye at the Portman heir. The family carriage keeps rolling under the red evening sky. Driver Aldio calls out that they'll be at the mansion any second. In the courtyard, Tyria waits with the maids and officially welcomes them to Wibben. Flashing an elegant smile, she introduces herself as Tyria Portman and says it's an honor to host them. Noticing the group looks beat, she suggests they head to their rooms to chill out. She asks Rhonda to show the guests to their rooms, which the head maid gladly does. Hours later, night falls over the mansion and knocks echo on one of the bedroom doors. Chilling in an armchair, Lord Polo finds the knocking weird and asks if it's room service. With confident steps, a guy barges into the room silently. Polo stops mid-sentence, and his eyes go wide when he sees the silhouette of the Portman heir. Elric stares the noble down seriously in the dark, and coldly warns that he's going to have to bother him tonight. Freaking out, the noble tumbles out of his armchair and lands clumsily on the marble floor. Pointing a shaking finger, he stutters in panic that dark stare proves he is the terrifying sword demon. The guy's screams echo out the windows, yelling that the young master is hiding Kasha's real face. Seeing his cover is totally blown with this old acquaintance, Elric steps closer and admits he isn't going to hide who he is anymore. Backing up on the floor in a panic, Polo asks why, begging for his life and bringing up that he already apologized back in the day. Elric sits in the guest's armchair and coldly asks if he means the day he humiliated his family. The guy shoots him an ice-cold glare, sharply pointing out he doesn't remember ever accepting that apology. Noticing the guy freaking out, Elric asks if he plans on staying on the floor and sarcastically invites him to take a seat so they can talk business. Staring him down with red eyes, the young master asks if his crew didn't travel all this way exactly to buy the wheat grown on his land. After the initial shock, the two sit face to face in the room. Lord Polo tries to get his act together, still sweating cold from being near the terrifying old sword demon. Elric kicks off the deal, revealing he bumped into the VIP Lord Ugel before they even got there. Polo, looking stressed, asks what they talked about, and the guy answers that the other noble threw a pretty interesting deal his way. Our MC asks if Eugel's game plan was to buy up Wibbin's entire crop in one massive sweep. The scene shows Lord Eugel holding a gold coin, confirming the wheat would be shipped to the western regions controlled by Armin. The old man slides the coin across the table, explaining a cut would go straight to the Portman family vault. But he drops a hard condition: absolute exclusivity on buying all the wheat for his kingdom. The diplomat acts super confident that the current boss of the Portman house will make the smartest choice. He wraps up with a greedy smile while saying our MC's last name. Hearing about the exclusivity trap, Lord Polo slams the table, cursing the Armin kingdom's greed. Pissed off, the noble yells that now the other crew's silence makes total sense, swearing at the old man who is planning to backdoor him on the deal. Taking advantage of his rival's rage, Elric calmly suggests they cut a direct deal right now, leaving Polo completely shocked. Smirking, the young master confirms the offer, throwing down only one rule: the price has to match the massive payout the rivals offered. Polo argues that, even though he's an Imperial supply officer, he doesn't have the clearance to greenlight a price that huge on his own. Elric sarcastically suggests that officially accepting those old apologies can act as collateral for the deal, promising there'll be no hard feelings later. The two stare each other down in silence, testing each other's limits. The officer tries to lowball at 60%, but the guy claps back that a discount like that would mess up his family's business. Lord Polo bites his lip, super stressed, realizing he's backed into a corner in this negotiation. Desperate not to lose the wheat, he bumps the offer to 70%, promising the Empire will cover all customs and shipping fees. Giving him the ultimate veteran negotiator stare, Elric drops the final counteroffer: 75% of the total value under the exact same conditions. With a handshake, the deal is locked in. Elric celebrates the win, while Polo admits he's blown away that he's the first guy to score such an epic deal against the Empire. Curious, the merchant asks why he picked him specifically out of everyone else. Our MC just stares at him silently with a cold look, thinking it was only because he looked like the easiest mark. Since he couldn't actually say that, he changes the subject, smiling and saying the deal is a chance to fix the bad vibes from their first meeting, making Polo breathe easy. The guy uses the good mood to say he's got one more favor, and the officer instantly tells him to go ahead. With a chill voice, the young master warns that if any rumors start going around that Kasha was spotted in Wibbin, things are gonna get real messy. Elric throws on a terrifying face, warning that if that happens, the contract will be rewritten in blood. Horrified by the threat, Lord Polo gulps hard and agrees immediately, nodding his head fast. Later, the delegates gather around a round table to officially wrap up the talks. Tyria Portman stands up and announces with a gorgeous smile that her family will sign the trade deal with the Imperial Army. Happy with the result, Elric claps quietly, watching his wife handle the moment like a total boss. While the delegation cheers, Lord Polo gets props from a buddy, even though he still looks pretty stressed. But Edmund Eugel slams the table, furious about the terms, screaming that the deal makes zero sense. The pissed-off diplomat yells at Tyria, asking if she ignored the barony lord's orders, but she just smiles calmly and says everything is going exactly how her husband planned. He leans over the table in a rage, asking if she realizes how crazy this trade is, calling her Miss, but the young woman cuts him off saying the correct title is Madam. Getting corrected leaves the gray-haired noble confused and speechless. She stands tall next to her husband, introducing herself as Tyria Portman, the legal wife of the lord of these lands. Throwing a threatening glare, she adds that it's insanely disrespectful for Edmund's crew to keep getting her title wrong on purpose. Feeling the heat from getting scolded, the diplomat swallows his pride, fixes his collar, and stutters out an apology to Madame Tyria. Seeing his colleague get embarrassed, Lord Polo can't hold back a quiet laugh, mocking the whole situation. Elric sighs with relief, closing his eyes with a smile, super proud of how strong his wife acted. He leans on his wooden cane to start pushing himself up from the table. Out in the courtyard, the young master tells the guards to safely escort the guests to the train station. From inside the departing carriage, Lord Polo waves the contract to say his goodbyes. Elric watches them leave with a serious face. The Portman couple stands side by side in the field, watching the ride disappear under the sun. The guy turns to his wife and admits he sees her completely differently now, confessing he had no idea she had such a tough, decisive side. With her eyes closed and her usual classy vibe, she just says she only told the truth. The blonde girl smiles and points out that he also turned out to be a really clever guy, leaving her husband surprised by the compliment. Flashing the contract papers, she explains Polo gave her the docs and the actual terms were way different from what they announced, proving they didn't take an L on the deal. Scratching his neck awkwardly, Elric admits the Armin envoy was just way too cocky and he only wanted to crush the guy's ego, getting total support from Tyria. The girl suggests heading back to the mansion and the guy agrees, walking chill right next to her. Meanwhile, the camera cuts to a yellow flag with Edward Wibbin's initials flying under a cloudy sky. It's the house of the guy who set up the trade trap. Suddenly, a crazy, desperate scream echoes through the gold doors. Edward runs like a madman through the halls holding his head, screaming because he doesn't get why his master plan tanked. The blonde dude with glasses cries out of pure rage, yelling that he was ready to pay a fortune for the wheat and split the profits, asking why Elric was so greedy he turned it down. He runs out to the balcony screaming in frustration, while his loyal white-haired assistant Trisend Failstow calm him down. Completely losing it, he flails around screaming that Elric ruined his flawless plans just to flex. Mid-tantrum, the guy ends up tripping over his own feet in the clumsiest way possible. He loses his balance and falls backward toward the floor. Before he takes a brutal fall, a hand catches his wrist super fast. Edward ends up upside down, his eyes wide as he realizes he got saved at the very last second. With insane reflexes, the pretty silver-haired assistant catches him in her arms. She easily carries him bridal style while dust kicks up from how strong she is. The girl scolds him for not listening when she told him to chill out, making him instantly and sweetly apologize. A little later, hot tea is served in a fancy gold cup. The assistant asks if he's chilled out now, and the guy lovingly says thanks for the tea. Back to normal, Edward crosses his fingers and thinks that, knowing Elric used to be Kasha, he never expected him to agree to a direct deal with the Empire, wondering what his rival is really plotting. Looking calm, the pretty silver-haired assistant suggests that sometimes the best way to figure out what someone's planning is just to ask them straight up. Edward Wibbin agrees, thinking hard, and decides he has no choice but to confront his rival face-to-face. Making his choice, the young blonde guy reaches out to open a fancy drawer in his desk. Looking hyper-focused, he pops open the secret compartment while planning his next move. Inside the drawer, a super-decorated gold revolver is sitting on red velvet, and he thinks to himself they're going to need a proper communication tool for this meetup. Meanwhile, the story jumps over to Elvis Graham's house. Sitting in his wheelchair, Elvis welcomes Lord Polo, who just got there and hands over a super important document. The light-haired noble takes the paper and asks curiously about the mystery message. Polo seriously drops that it's a letter sent personally by Elric Portman, leaving the host shocked to hear the name. Wearing white gloves, Elvis slowly unrolls the scroll to read. He scans the writing with an incredibly serious, focused look on his face. Suddenly, the aristocrat breaks character and lets out a muffled laugh, totally confusing the merchant. Elvis throws his head back and laughs out loud, covering his face with his hand. Laughing, he says he was trying to figure out who this Elric guy was, pointing out Polo must have lost his mind when he realized he was staring down the terrifying Kasha. Still smiling, he thanks the merchant for delivering the letter in person. Happy the job is done, Lord Polo says his task is complete and says goodbye to head home, with Elvis wishing him a safe trip. Alone in his office, Elvis stares at the letter thinking, muttering that the sword demon vanished so fast he wondered where he went, totally shocked to find out he went straight to Wibbin. The scene shifts to a snowy mountain road, where the sound of gunshots shatters the silence. A hunting rifle barrel smokes after a shot. A young hunter cheers his awesome aim while his buddies hype him up. The guys run super hyped toward the giant dead deer, celebrating the kill that'll get them promoted to pro hunters. While two of them crouch down to check the catch and complain about how much it's going to suck dragging the animal back, the group leader freezes, feeling a bad vibe. His buddies think he's acting weird and tell him to go get the horses, asking if he's deaf. Sweating pure terror, the guy puts his finger to his lips and begs them to shut up right now. He grips his club defensively and quietly orders them to step away from the deer, confusing the heck out of the others. Shaking, the young guy explains he's getting a chill that means a magic beast is right on top of them, insisting they need to run. His buddy brushes it off, saying obviously it's cold because it's winter, telling him to quit acting dumb and bring the horses. But a massive boom shakes the ground right in front of them, sending everyone into a total panic. Desperate, the guy points his gun forward and screams for the idiots to move, because there's something terrifying right behind them. Out of the trees, a massive creature silently appears, casting a terrifying shadow over the hunters. It's a giant wolf with razor-sharp teeth and glowing supernatural blue eyes, famously known as the Blade Wolf. Shortly after, the scene cuts to the Portman mansion covered in snow clouds. In the drawing room, Tyria listens to the report, looking totally shocked and worried about how bad it is. The three surviving hunters are on their knees, faces dirty and looking totally defeated, admitting they ran for their lives in pure panic. Being super nice, the young lady thanks them for having the guts to report what happened and tells them to grab some tea, promising she'll talk to her husband to fix the mess. She asks Rhonda to get them hot food and drinks to warm the guys up. In the library, loyal butler Aldio pulls a massive illustrated monster encyclopedia off the shelves. Walking with his boss, the old man flips through the book, matching info with what the survivors said. He closes the book looking dead serious and reveals the beast they saw as 100 a blade wolf. Tyria asks if it's a magic beast and Aldio says yes, but explains that species should have gone extinct after their old alpha got killed. The girl's eyes go wide, remembering that the alpha of that pack was the exact monster that left the huge scar on Elric's neck back in the day. With that memory, a hardcore look of determination takes over the Portman heir's face. She stands her ground, declaring she won't let her people face the same danger her husband did, and orders a hunting party to be set up to take the monster down. Aldio bows and promises he'll personally handle gathering elite hunters for the mission. But before he can leave, Tyria calls him back. Giving him a super secretive look, she demands this entire operation be kept completely under wraps so Elric never finds out. The butler is surprised by the crazy request but agrees to keep his mouth shut. The next morning, everything is ready for the carriage to leave. With blushing cheeks and a sweet smile, Elric says goodbye to his wife, promising he'll wrap up his business and be back fast. The couple shares a loving look, and Tyria wishes him a safe trip, standing next to Aldio in the snowy yard as she watches the ride pull away. Worried, Aldio asks if it wouldn't be smarter to just tell the Lord, arguing he might feel hurt if he finds out the truth from someone else. But Tyria figures that, knowing how stubborn he is, he'd demand to handle it all himself even while injured. The heir looks away, mentioning the whole mess reminds her of a really painful day from the past. In her memories, young Tyria cries hysterically while screaming for Elric, who was running straight into danger. Back then, the little guy bravely stood between her and a giant, red-eyed wolf, holding nothing but a stick just to protect her. Dead set on making sure her husband never gets put in danger again, the girl repeats they'll deal with the beast on their own and asks if the team is ready. Aldio says yes and brings out the 3 veteran warriors he hired, swearing they're the absolute best hunters in the barony. Tyria plans to finish the hunt before her husband gets back, but the butler freaks out when he realizes she actually wants to go with the group. Wearing a blue coat, the young noble firmly argues that going into danger with the people she sent is her duty as an aristocrat. Realizing she's not going to change her mind, Aldio gives in, but makes her promise she'll fall back the second the magic beast shows up. Meanwhile, the scene jumps to the Wibbin shopping district, where bundled-up locals are walking through the snow. The wooden sign of an old, legit local clinic is shown. Inside, a friendly doctor checks our MC's leg and is hyped about how well the scar is healing, saying it's basically completely fixed. Hyped up, Elric asks if he can ditch the cane, but the doc tells him to chill and keep using it for just a little longer to be safe. Changing the subject, the doctor looks at the guy's neck and asks if that massive scar caused any permanent damage. The young master smiles and jokes that he didn't get any permanent damage because he had a ridiculously talented doctor fix him up. The doc smiles at the compliment but remembers the treatment was brutal because Elric was so young and the blade wolf's bite caused frostbite, bringing up how the kid's dad cried and begged desperately to save his son's life. Dropping that info completely shocks our MC, since he never pictured his hardcore dad doing something like that. The doctor laughs at his reaction and admits it was a crazy scene, being the only time he ever saw the terrifying Lord Hovan turn pale from fear. Picturing his strict dad, Elric swallows hard and admits it's really hard to imagine that cold guy acting so desperate. Saying goodbye at the door, the doctor reminds the young guy not to push himself too hard over the next few days. Our MC opens the door and takes his first step out into the snowy street. Leaning on his cane, Elric walks with an armed guard walking him out. Out of nowhere, a familiar voice calls his name, making him turn around completely surprised. The young heir's eyes go wide in shock when he recognizes the guy with the goatee and yells, "Luton." Luton, Elric's childhood buddy who is now a royal knight, smiles and hyped up celebrates his old captain coming back. Super happy about the reunion, Elric hugs his friend while Luton says he came running the second he got the letter. Our MC brings up the rumors that his buddy joined the Royal Knights, and the proud guy confirms it, showing off the sword the court gave him. Elric suggests they go somewhere private to chat, and Luton totally agrees, dying to know what his captain was up to while he was MIA. But their chat gets cut off when a messenger runs up screaming in a panic for Knight Luton to deliver a super urgent letter. Out of breath, the soldier hands over a scroll and announces it's a rescue request from the Portman family. The news hits like a bomb, leaving both guys stunned, with Elric demanding to know what the heck that SOS actually means. The messenger nervously spills that the young lady Tyria Portman is the reason for the emergency. With pure panic in his eyes, our MC listens to the soldier confirm that his wife was ambushed by a magic beast out in the woods. Meanwhile, up in the Wibbin Mountains, gunshots echo through the blizzard. Two vicious blade wolves sprint super fast through the snow, their blue eyes glowing with rage as they charge the group. One of the elite hunters takes aim and fires a perfect shot at the beasts. The bullet nails one of the wolves right in the forehead, making it let out a massive howl of pain. While the warriors fight off the pack and scream orders to protect Tyria, Maid Marie runs with her boss trying to find cover. Pointing into the trees, the redhead spots an old cabin and tells them to hide in there. Marie and Tyria sprint to the door while the maid begs her to get inside and stay safe. Outside, the hunter captain yells for them to light the glow stones to see through the storm. The warriors grab the glowing crystals and run in opposite directions, planning to use the magic light to pull the beasts aggro and keep them away from the cabin. The plan totally works and the pack takes the bait, chasing after the hunters holding the lights. Inside the freezing, dark cabin, Tyria and Marie huddle under a blanket, shivering from the cold and pure terror. Feeling guilty for the mess, the boss apologizes for dragging her maid into this nightmare, but Marie claps back saying she wanted to come and chose to be there. Holding her boss's hands, the maid tries to chill her out and tells her to hang tough, saying she already sent an SOS and backup will be there any minute. With a sad smile, Tyria says that, even though this is a total disaster, she'd make the same choice to hide the plan from Elric, just glad she didn't put her husband's life on the line. Marie gets emotional seeing how much her boss cares about the young master, with tears of sympathy welling up in her eyes. Meanwhile, driving through the crazy blizzard, two horses gallop at top speed, tearing through the wind. Riding like his life depends on it, Elric is eating himself alive with anxiety and doubt, asking himself why Tyria decided to face this nightmare alone, and if she really thinks he's that useless of a husband. Luton screams for the captain to try and chill, promising he'll save Tyria no matter what it takes and asking him to just trust his strength. Elric says thanks for the real support, feeling a tiny bit better in the middle of all this panic. In a flashback, little Luton was running and crying while hearing Tyria screaming for Elric. Back then, the Portman heir stepped right in front of the giant, red-eyed beast by himself to buy time for his friends to run. Little Luton felt super guilty for running to get help and leaving his captain to fight all alone. Back to the present, the royal knight rides hard and silently swears he'll never let his buddy fight alone ever again. Up ahead, one of the hunters spots them coming and waves like crazy. Elric jumps off his horse while it's still moving and runs toward the soldier in the snow. The young master grabs the hunter's shoulders, totally desperate, asking where his wife is, and gets a huge wave of relief hearing she made it to a cabin. But the warrior explains that his squad got trapped after acting as bait to pull the beasts away and keep her safe. Relieved that his girl is safe, Elric tells the soldier to take him straight to where the guys are pinned down so he can bail them out. But Luton puts a heavy hand on our MC's shoulder and stops him from going through with that crazy plan. The knight argues that he needs to sprint straight to his wife, promising he'll personally handle rescuing the lost hunters, even knowing how insane the wolves are. Luton flashes a confident smile and tells the captain to trust him, proudly stating he isn't that scared little kid anymore. Elric smiles back and instantly agrees, acknowledging that his buddy really did level up into a true knight. The armored guy orders the hunter to guide him to his squad, and the two run off to do the rescue. With his heart beating out of his chest from stress, our MC turns toward the shelter and hypes himself up to run into Tyria's arms. The heir sprints with everything he's got through the brutal forest blizzard. His feet sink deep into the snow with every hard step. Shielding his eyes from the wind, the guy curses the storm and prays like crazy that everyone is okay. After an exhausting search, he finally spots the outline of the cabin through the trees. Elric kicks the wooden door of the shelter wide open in one go. Out of breath and totally panicked, the young master screams his wife's name while frantically looking around the room. Huddled in a corner, Tyria and Marie jump in terror and stare at our MC in complete shock. Without saying a single word, the guy walks fast right toward his wife. Elric wraps her in a super tight, relieved hug, leaving the maid completely stunned by the huge PDA. With blushing cheeks from the surprise, Tyria hugs him back and asks why he traveled all the way out here to find her. The young master squeezes her tight against his chest, like he needed to physically prove to himself she was actually safe and sound. He pulls back a little and, looking half mad and half worried, yells that he should be the one asking that, demanding to know why she pulled such a dangerous stunt without talking to him. Tyria awkwardly looks away and admits she only did it because she didn't want to put him in danger again. Hurt by the answer, Elric looks her dead in the eye and asks in a sad tone if she really has that little faith in his strength. Desperate to fix the misunderstanding, the blonde girl hugs him again and stutters that it wasn't what she meant at all. The guy hugs her back and admits he's just happy she's safe, begging her to promise she'll never try to solo a dangerous situation like that again. Snuggled up against her husband's chest, the girl closes her eyes with a beautiful smile and officially makes the promise. Wrapped in her blanket, young Marie watches her boss's romantic movie moment looking totally thrilled. Suddenly, heavy footsteps crunch outside, making the couple jump back on high alert. Marie runs to the door and happily announces that the other elite hunters made it back from the woods safe and sound. Elric walks out with his wife and gives the team props for the solid work, thanking them for carrying the mission. But scanning the group, the young master realizes someone super important is missing, and his face instantly drops. He harshly demands to know where Luton is, making the lead hunter awkwardly look away. The soldier nervously admits the knight ordered them to fall back while he stayed behind alone to tank the wolf pack, leaving our MC completely paralyzed with shock. Overcome with rage, Elric slaps his own forehead in frustration and curses his childhood best friend's absolute stupidity. Without missing a beat, he orders the warriors to safely escort Tyria and Marie down the mountain while he heads straight back into the woods to save Luton. But the second he turns around to leave, a hand grabs his coat sleeve super tight. The guy looks back and sees his wife's terrified face, as she admits she's absolutely panicking that he's going to get hurt. With tears in her eyes and blushing cheeks, Tyria begs him to promise he'll come back alive and safe right back into her arms.